I had grand ideas at some point and I forgot to write them down, so right now my mind's blank.
That's so interesting. Hey, well, let's talk about memory then. Let's talk
Okay, well,
about
since
memory.
since I've forgotten what I wanted to talk about, I think that's a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And memory is such a funny thing because we talk about. I think we beat this dead horse into the ground multiple times, but heck, we might as well beat it some more, right? Let's talk about facts, logic, truth, memories. And I don't know about you, but a lot of times my memories I find out later, I would swear like it was absolute truth of what happened. And then later I found out that I just started making stuff up. And
Well,
that ever
outright
happened
made
to
it
you?
up or misremembered pieces of something.
Well, I'm calling it basically the same thing. I mean, if you want to be nicer, maybe misremembered pieces of it, actually.
Because
Yeah.
I will misremember facts in a situation. I will remember that. Oh, I'm the one who made that happen, and it's actually someone else who did it, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Or
talking
I'll
about. Exactly.
remember it as your idea, but it wasn't your idea, right?
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of things I'm thinking of.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hands on Logos podcast. This is where we discuss current events, personal growth, and any other random topic that crosses our minds. Our goal is to have a meaningful discussion that help us to see the topics we discuss more clearly. Our hope is we can help you expand your self-awareness, develop your critical thinking, and learn to be less reactive to the world around you. And most importantly, remember, be curious. If you like what you hear, like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any feedback, please leave a comment. We want to hear what you think. We appreciate you. Chris.
Yes,
Guess what
Scott.
day it is, Chris? Guess what day it is?
It is Podcast Friday.
It's Podcast Friday, but guess what, Chris? It's something else. Something else that's very important
What's
happening
that?
today. Do you have any idea? I'm going to give you 3 guesses.
Something that's really important. 3 guesses. Well, let's see. It's the 21st, isn't it? 21st.
21st? That marks something. That's a very important day.
21st. March 21st.
Hey, we got 3 hours. We could play this
So we
game.
did St. Patty's Day earlier in the week.
Yeah.
Taxes are no
Whatever.
longer in March. Haven't been for decades. Gosh. 21st. What's on the 21st?
Chris, come on.
Give me a hint.
Come on. It's
Give
a
me a
it's
hint.
a change of season today.
Not today.
Yeah, it's
Is it?
21st, springtime. Yeah.
Oh, I thought it
Hang
was
on,
like on the 22nd, 23rd or something like
why
that.
don't you fact check me? Hang on. Fact check me. Let me see. I could be totally wrong.
Yeah, I'm not going off any facts. I'm just going off anecdotal memories. Is it the 21st?
Oh, we should talk about memories. That'd be a good one. Oh, hang on. It was March 20th. Okay, never mind. Happy spring yesterday.
Well, it's earlier than I thought. I thought it was like 22nd, 23rd on a regular basis, but okay. All right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sure.
Anyways, okay,
I mean,
well,
we've
all
had
right.
sun for the last couple of days here. It's been quite nice out, and we've been hitting the
Yeah,
70s, and yeah.
yeah, it's super nice. It's like 72 out right now. Low humidity, very few bugs, but that's going to change very soon. Here, it starts to get really humid. Like you start getting into April, May, it's like, oh boy, it's just miserable. So, anyways, all right. So, what are we going to talk about today, Chris? Do you have any ideas? I got a couple.
I had grand ideas at some point, and I forgot to write them down, so right now my mind's blank.
That's so interesting. Hey, well, let's talk about memory then. Let's talk
Okay, well,
about
since
memory.
since I've forgotten what I wanted to talk about, I think that's a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And memory is such a funny thing because we talk about. I think we beat this dead horse into the ground multiple times, but heck, we might as well beat it some more, right? Let's talk about facts, logic, truth, memories. And I don't know about you, but a lot of times my memories I find out later, I would swear like it was absolute truth of what happened. And then later I found out that I just started making stuff up. And
Well,
that ever
outright
happened
made
to
it
you?
up or misremembered pieces of something.
Well, I'm calling it basically the same thing. I mean, if you want to be nicer, maybe misremembered pieces of it, actually.
Because
Yeah.
I will misremember facts in a situation. I will remember that, oh, I'm the one who made that happen, and it's actually someone else who did it, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Or
talking
I'll
about.
remember it as your idea, but it wasn't your idea, right?
Yeah,
Those are the kinds of things I'm thinking of.
yeah, yeah. I think that happens to everybody. And so as right next door, he's an attorney. He used to be a prosecuting attorney, and he said one of the least important things, are the things that we value the least, is an eyewitness testimony of something.
Yeah.
Just because people just don't get the facts right. Now, if somebody's trained to observe things, we kind of value their opinion a little bit higher. But even then, boy, the brain just fills in just stuff that it wants
But
to be true versus what
I think
is.
there's two aspects, right? You've got a bias based on what you're watching, and you don't
Yeah,
see the rest. And the
yeah,
other thing is when you, in this case, misinterpret the factual evidence probably through some framework or filter you've got in your head,
yeah. Of course, yeah,
right? Because the
yeah.
first one I'm thinking of, there's that famous video of people playing basketball, and a guy walks through in a gorilla suit, and you
The
don't even
girl suit,
see the
yeah,
guy
that's
in the gorilla
perfect,
suit,
actually.
right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's the common one. So that's one where you're focusing on one thing, you don't see other
yeah,
things that you should be noticing.
yeah,
But then there's the one I think you're talking about where people who have the exact same experience will remember it differently.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. That's exactly right. And if anybody's watching this, if you're like an expert in memory or anything related to this topic, I'd love to have you come on the show because this is such an amazing kind of thought process. As well as, Chris, it's like the way you ask questions can get people to change their perspective of things as well too.
Yeah. The way I ask questions often gets people to be very defensive.
Yeah,
And honestly, I'm not trying to attack anyone usually. What I'm trying to do is gather information so I can build my own understanding.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I start going, and I start asking, so what about this, and where did this come from? And I'll start going to the root, and I realize that to others they think I'm trying to dismantle their belief, their idea, whatever
oh yeah,
thought they've come up with. And
yeah,
actually, what I'm trying to do is reconstruct how they got to that thought. But
yeah,
if I don't say that, it just sounds like I'm drilling into your opinion, and I'm
yeah.
going to tear it apart, and that's not what the intention is.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm sure they feel like they're in the middle of a room tied to a chair with a spotlight on them, and
Yeah. And
you will
I'm like,
tell
I'm
me.
not looking here. I want to know the pieces that led to this so that I can
Yeah,
get in alignment with you. And once we're in alignment, then I can have the conversation,
yeah,
and try to, I don't want to steer the way you think, but I want to point out things and see if it changes the way you think. If
yeah,
you value something in your thought process that I think, maybe that shouldn't be valued in that way, I can
yeah,
bring it up and say, well, what about this situation? Or what about this? Or, isn't
yeah,
that important?
yeah. And I think this is really good for so people with our kind of mindset, which we're analysts, right? And I don't know about you, but I know for me, my biggest fear is being wrong. That's why I wanted to spend a little more time thinking about it. Hang on, before we launch up, Chris, let's just like go over this again. Let's just think about it a little bit. So it can come across as being very like an interrogation. And so I think for analyst type, and I think for anybody, I think asking the questions in the right way with the right tone is like really important.
Yeah. I'm thinking, how do you communicate that? How do you communicate? So you said with the right tone, but what
Yeah, the
is the right
tone.
tone? I guess maybe. What is the right tone?
Well, so there's a guy, Chris Voss. I've been kind of studying him on and off. He's like a FBI, ex FBI negotiator, and so he's got little courses and YouTube videos, and he calls it the late night DJ voice, where you can ask questions, right? So it's very
Relaxed.
calming,
Yeah.
relaxed, and he's got one question that I've actually tried it and it actually works like magic, but I don't want to overdo it actually. So let's say making a demand of me, right? You better do this. You better pay me $8 million or I'm gonna kill the hostage, right? And so one question, like super calm, he says is, well, how do you expect me to do that? And all of a sudden now I'm basically just hot potatoing the problem back onto you. And that's where negotiation can start. And so these questions, man, I'm just being fascinated with the fact that questions are so powerful if you get it right with the right tonality
Well,
and a disarm.
the other thing he does is he asks questions where no is the answer he wants, not
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Right?
He's
He
forced.
reverses the question um, because it's easier for someone to say no than yes.
Yeah, right, right,
Yeah.
right. Well,
So
now, well, hang on. Some people, I know some people, they hate saying no, right? So they'll just overcommit and do all that sort of stuff. That especially happens at churches. I've seen they're like, oh, we need you on this community or that community, or oh, it's just one time, or it's just this, or it's just that. You
it's an
know?
interesting point, but I wonder if his reasoning holds true, and that even people like that, they're feeling pressure to say yes,
Yeah,
right? They're
right.
feeling social pressure or some other pressure to say yes, and I'm wondering still at their core, at their individual level, if it's easier to say no.
It depends. For me, I have no problem saying no, right? My wife, though, it is difficult to get a no out of her. She just doesn't want to say no. Because it's not polite, it's not proper. You know, she's being selfish. So I think it really depends on the person.
You made a comment that you have a fear of being wrong, which is why you tend to overanalyze, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the common fear of most analysts. I think I'm who knows, man. I could be
My,
making that up.
mine is I don't think it's that so much anymore. There was a time when I think that was it. Mine is the fear of not getting the best result.
Oh, okay.
So, if I'm going to put in the effort, I want to get the best result possible.
Yeah, right.
And I have this idea that if I put a little bit more thought into it and planning into it, the result will be better.
Yeah.
But I do that to the point where I spend all my time thinking and planning and none of it acting. So that's the analysis paralysis idea, right? But it's not from a fear of being wrong, or maybe it is, but in this case, being wrong means not getting the optimal result or getting the
Yeah,
best part.
right. Yeah, exactly. Right. And you know the funny thing is, that's like a real common thing. But and listen, people out there, do not say but. Replace it with an and. And I'm not sure where mine was going on that, Chris. I'm not sure.
I was watching, is it Vin Jiang, the Australian guy who does speech coaching for people?
Oh, yeah.
And he was being interviewed, and he did the say yes and don't say yes but. But he was using it specifically when people are insulting you, right? You're such an idiot. Go, yes, and sometimes I really do make stupid decisions.
Yeah, yeah.
And the whole idea is to instead of giving them what someone wants when they insult you, which is a reaction, you agree with them, which kind of disarms them. So
Yeah,
he was
it
showing how to
totally
use that.
takes
Yeah.
all the fun away, right? Because you're like, well,
And the idea here that we default to an and instead of a but, you can say the exact same thing after that word. Yeah. You're right, but I think we should do this. You're
yeah,
right, and I think we should do this.
yeah, right.
It's the same thing except for the and but, and yet it changes the tonality, the way it comes across.
Well, it negates everything you said before it. You did
Even
this,
though
this, this.
even though you're technically agreeing, since you're not 100% agreeing,
Yeah,
you're introducing not a contradiction, but a conflict.
conflict. Yeah, yeah. And you have to be very careful of that because, like, I consider myself a loudmouth. I'll be the first one raising my hand, speaking up, or whatever like that. And that's a problem because I'm wrong like most of the time. Where you may have somebody that is a different personality type that actually knows the answer, that's very timid. And so now if you're trying to extract information, I use the word she. I mean, I guess that's a little sexist. She or him, those personality types, will not speak up because there's too many loudmouths talking. And then I've talked to them after that event in meetings, and like I'd be 2 months later, and I would ask her like, you knew all along what the problem was, right? She's like, yeah. I mean, it's so obvious. I'm like, why didn't you speak up and say something? Because you loudmouths wouldn't shut up, right? And I'm like,
It,
ouch.
it's conflict. You're basically, as soon as you state something emphatically,
Yeah.
For me to say anything contradictory to it is conflict. And if my
Yeah.
character is not to cause conflict, I'm just gonna be quiet, right?
You're just going to cause, yeah,
My
exactly.
old boss, she was often the smartest person in the room when it came to whatever the topic was,
Yeah.
right? She had researched it, she knew it, she understood all the inputs. And so when someone would give a simplified comment about it, opinion about it, and it happened to be the CEO or one of the C-level officers, she, there it's not just you're disagreeing with a superior who has power.
Which
So
could have conflict.
some of them are open to that, some of them are not.
Yeah,
And
right.
so she would often not say these things. And so what happened was several of the people that worked with her realized she needed to be able to be comfortable giving her thoughts. And
Yeah.
so they would go around the room and start with her
Yeah.
or start with people who weren't as emphatic or were lower in the food chain so
Yeah.
she could comment. And also at the same time she was building her comfort level
Yeah,
as
right.
the expert in the room who could
Yeah.
talk. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing, it's like when you have that expert techie who's got no social skills at all,
Yeah.
right? They may be the smartest, most accomplished, best person to do something, but they're not going to thrive in an environment where because of conflict or because of social
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of crazy. And if you're ever in a leadership position with a team, you have to be very aware of that and make sure that you include everybody. Like in this case, I mean, I've actually done this before in meetings. I'm like, there'll be like four loudmouths and there'll be like a couple of very meek. I go, listen, you guys shut up. I've heard, I know what you're talking about. I want to
Hmm.
hear what Mary has to say about this, right? And I tell him,
Yeah.
zip
Who
it.
hasn't spoken? Yeah, who hasn't spoken? It's your turn. All right.
Yeah, yeah, zip it. And there's a set of cards. This guy David Marquet taught me about leadership. He was an ex submarine captain, and he had something called like a red card, where literally if you got the red card, you were forced to take an opposite position. And he's like, I love that. Not necessarily for the conflict, but he's like, we just sometimes you get tunnel vision and you can get a group going down this
Yeah.
way and you're just completely blind to other sort of options, you know?
We talked about the 10th man, right? The idea being in a room, the 10th man, his job is to contradict everyone,
I haven't heard
to
that. That's
argue with everyone.
interesting, actually.
Um,
Yeah.
so the reference, the most recent reference was in that zombie movie World War Z,
Oh, I think I've
and
seen the
I
world.
think they were in Israel or someplace like that, and they were talking about this. But it actually, I think, goes back further than that, but it is my understanding. It's a practice that the Israelis came up with, was they didn't want to get groupthink to
Yeah.
shut out the opposing voice, so they would set up one person's job was to be the person, no matter what your opinion was, your job was to disagree,
Yeah. Right. 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 Right.
right?
Play devil's
And
advocate.
and I think that's a good rule for people to follow internally.
Yeah.
Always question what you know to be true,
Yeah.
and you can still have that opinion after you've questioned it. But the point being, ask the question: why do I believe this? Is there a flaw in this logic? Um, how strongly do I believe it? Am I like, convinced? Am I willing to bet money on this, or is it
Yeah.
more like something like, I think this is likely true, which is
Yeah.
honestly most of the facts that I see in the world, or most of what I hear on the news and see, I interpret through it's a 60% chance it's right or a 70%
Yeah.
chance it's right. I
Yeah.
always have some percentage of disbelief. I actually hold two different opinions in my mind, but I
Yeah.
use one as the basis for going forward until
Yeah.
proven otherwise.
Yeah. See, that's good. And I think in general, like one of the rules, eventually we'll get to all these rules and have a little handout or something people can download. I think one of the rules is just don't take yourself too seriously and always ask the question like in terms of probability, like how sure am I about this? Like what am I like not looking at or not paying attention to? Or I think the question is, what am I pretending not to see because I don't want to be wrong? Because I might be embarrassed or I may have to say that I've changed my mind or whatever. I think those are important questions to ask yourself. You can ask them in private, you know.
Well, so one thing I was thinking of is, you know a lot about a topic. Like you might know a lot about guns or machining or whatever it is that you've got, right? Or marketing, whatever we want to say. And you're going to assume that in most situations, you're the most expert person in the room on that. And
Well, and those two things.
99.9% of the time, you're probably right.
Let me
So
just protect
that's a fair, I think it's a fair viewpoint to have, given the level of expertise. You know, with things that you're an expert in and things that you're just so at, right?
Well,
But
can I just?
go
I
ahead.
want to reframe that a little bit. I may not be an expert, but I do know about this topic more than the other person does.
Yeah. So if we use, let's go back to the lovely 80-20 rule. You're in the
Yeah,
20%, top 20% of people who know this stuff. So you're
yeah,
more than likely you go into a room, you're going to know more than the other person.
yeah, yeah,
But when you've been in that situation, and so you kind of learn to act in a way where you are the authority around
yeah,
most of the people around you.
yeah,
And someone who's introduced to you, who's not introduced as an expert in that topic, if they were, you would automatically kind of hold back and wait to judge their knowledge level.
yeah.
But
Right.
you aren't told that, that this other person is actually more of an expert than you, or potentially
Yeah,
more of an expert than you. And you go in there with that attitude, and they've got an attitude of a lot of they're self-effacing. They don't show off a lot. They're not coming across like a know-it-all.
yeah.
And after a little bit of conversation, you put your foot in your mouth and you realize, oh, this person knows more than me.
And those are like a lot more in some
Right?
cases.
And it happens to me. It happens to everyone on a topic
Yeah,
that you like. I think building in a certain level of questioning yourself. Am I
yeah,
really the best in the room? Am I really how good am I?
yeah. Right. Yeah,
Right?
yeah. How good
And
are
we
you?
have a desire. Even the quietest people around have some desire for the recognition of being an expert in something.
Oh my
I want you
gosh,
to
people.
recognize my expertise.
Yeah,
But we also need to understand that there's always someone who knows more, or
always,
there's
always.
always someone who knows. It's not always more. Well, let me rephrase that. It's not always more of the same topic. It's more of they know more and can leverage the information. So some people are just
Yeah,
they're deeper experts in the topic.
yeah,
Other ones are broader experts who are able to leverage that information to actually get more out
yeah.
of it. And
Right. They can put it together. Yeah,
and
yeah.
you're realizing that you could be in the top 5%, 10% of people as far as intelligence and knowledge. There are people who are going to be smarter than you, people who are going to be
Yeah,
more capable, people who are going to be more socially adept, people who are going to be stronger physically. There's
yeah,
always going to be whatever you can do, someone can do better.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. It's so interesting. Like I go see doctors or whatever, and some doctors I like and some I don't. And some doctors, I'm like, how did you get through medical school? Ones I've seen. I mean, you're as dumb as a box of rocks, right? All you do is like, all you are is a decision tree. You don't do any thinking. You're like, oh, you got a pain in your left arm. Okay, take this pill to stop the pain. It's like, okay, I mean, don't you want to like ask some questions? Don't you want to see maybe try to dig in and see what the cause of that is so we can fix the actual problem instead of just putting a band-aid on it? I mean, don't you want to, do a lot of these things? And they're like, no, I don't have time to do that. I see 60 patients a day and I just don't have time.
But when you think about this, in your mind, you've got a definition of what a doctor is. Society, the medical profession, has their own definition of what a
Yeah,
doctor is.
right. Yeah,
Your definition is probably going to be based upon your experiences, the people you've talked to, the level of knowledge you have. You expect them to have more knowledge than you,
oh my gosh. I mean,
right?
I know I get so frustrated. I'd be like, listen, dude, I've watched like 3 hours of YouTube videos and I appear to have more command of this information than you do.
Well, and
Something's wrong with that.
just like anyone else, once you get your degree, once you get your job, not everyone continues to learn. Some people said, "I got it. I'm set for the next 30 years of my career," and they don't bother to learn anymore,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Those
right.
people eventually will lose out in the game of life or the game of career or whatever, but they're fine for a while.
Yeah,
The ones who continually learn, the ones who are continually asking questions, those are the ones that I think you think of as the real doctor. But the
yeah,
thing
right.
is, if that's all the people we had, there wouldn't be enough doctors in the world.
I know.
And
Well, I know. That's
all you can say, society has defined a doctor, the middle level, the 50 percentile, whatever, the absolute average of a doctor, as being this amount of knowledge, right?
yeah,
And so, and that's what they've defined as good enough to be a doctor. Right?
Yeah.
But when you and I are talking about like doctors that we can name, usually we're
Yeah.
talking about people that are way over on the bell curve in the top
Oh, yeah.
5% or 1%. People who understand things at a level that these doctors don't. I mean, they put the regular doctor to shame as far as knowledge.
Oh my gosh, yeah, because there's so many things. Yeah, exactly. And the problem is, I'd like to go see those doctors, but usually the price tag is very, very high for those guys because they're usually a concierge, cash only person, and they don't even deal
Well,
with insurance because
if
it's
you
such a
don't
pain.
need to, if you don't want to have to deal with insurance and you've got the skills that people are willing to pay for, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why wouldn't you? You should do that
And
actually.
and if you still want to help people who don't have money, you just open it up to people who don't have money and say, I'll screen a few people, and people if you don't have money, you can
Yeah,
ask, and I'll help a few of you out, right? I mean, there's you can balance it out without using the insurance system, which is just insurance companies basically just feeds shareholders money, right? Is really what it's for, which is one of
yeah.
the reasons we have so many problems because they optimize for efficiency, not for effectiveness.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, efficiency. I guess they can crank out 80 people a day or
I
whatever.
mean,
So,
you can say it's effective for society, but for the individual, it is not. It's all about efficiency, not effectiveness.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why, oh, this is an expensive cure. We're not going to approve it for you,
Oh
right?
my gosh, I
It's an
know.
effective cure. This is an effective cure that could help you, but it costs too much money.
Yeah, yeah. And it's
So
so
it's not
funny.
efficient enough, and we're not going to give it to you.
Yeah, I know my doctor. He's a podiatrist, so I go see him every once in a while. And I'm like, okay, what do I do? What kind of thing can I get? I need some other sandal thing. And his first response is every single time is, oh, I don't know if insurance is gonna. I don't think insurance will cover that. And I'm like, dude, I don't care. Like, listen, if you told me you wear these shoes and you'll never have a problem ever in the rest of your life and it's $1,000, I'll do it like right this second. I mean, he squabbles over like $50 for some sort of
A lot of
like
people do. A lot of people do squabble over that. A lot of people, $50 makes enough of a difference to their lifestyle that week, that month, that they worry about that.
yeah,
You
I
know,
know.
and,
Maybe,
and that's unfortunate that the bulk. I don't know what bulk percentage is of Americans can't afford to spend more money on the product that would help them the most.
I know.
And
I
I
know.
know some people say like if we got rid of the insurance system and everyone just paid out of pocket, overall everything would settle down at a cheaper rate. I think that's
Probably
true,
so, maybe.
right? Your specialist will always cost more because they
Yeah.
can, right? But if I wonder if you let the free market control this, and there weren't enough of a specialist kind of doctor, more people would get trained. They'd get paid more, which would be higher demand. So more people would get trained as those kinds of doctors.
Heck
Right?
yeah.
Over time, the problem is how many people would suffer in the meantime. That's
Yeah,
the
and
tough
I'm
thing.
like, and is that ethically right? Is that ethically right? If you've got a superior set of skills, should you only help people with money and usually large sums of it, you
Is it
know?
your responsibility to make sure that people have the resources? Or is that the government's responsibility or society's responsibility? Maybe their tribe or their family should be the one. I'm playing the devil's advocate here, but why is it the doctor who went and spent the years of training, why is it their responsibility to share their knowledge? Why isn't it society's responsibility to make sure he's well off enough to be able to do that?
Yeah, those are really good points, actually.
I mean,
And
where do we point the figure at the person for not being generous enough? But is that the only place we can place blame?
oh, I'm sure we could find a lot of places to point the finger at, which
Well,
brings me,
it's always the politicians. They're always at fault. So
they're always to blame. Yeah, they're easy targets. Which brings me to a point is that, and boy, oh boy, I'm really working around this thing. So, in fact, I'd like to talk about this, and you'll probably be okay with it. So the concept of like victim mentality, which is very unpopular, right? But I think it's true in some cases, as opposed to taking real responsibility for yourself. And I think those are important things to really determine because, for instance, like I have diabetes and it's a self inflicted wound because I have trouble controlling what goes in my mouth, right? Now, I know it's genetics and it's this and there's a bunch of other stuff going on, but it's like if I can control myself and my behavior, I'm going to be able to live a much better life. And in order to do that, I have to at some point say, that this is my responsibility and I am to blame for this. And that's a very unpopular move right now in our society, you know?
So I'm coming up with this thing as you're talking called, I just called it the spectrum of responsibility. There are things
Wait,
that are in your control, and there are things that are not in your
did
control.
you come up with that all by yourself just right now?
Just this moment, it just because we keep talking about being on a spectrum, so I was just thinking spectrum of responsibility, and I think on one side is like it's totally your fault, on the other side it's totally not your fault. It's external conditions,
Yeah.
and everything, nothing is on one side or the other 100%. It's somewhere in that spectrum. So I mean,
Yeah.
when we look at your health and at the foods you ate growing up, what foods were available to you? What foods were the food industry making? What were they making the food out of? Was their goal to make nutritious food or to make cheap food? Was their goal to give us calories or to give us the nutrients we need? You
Yeah.
know,
Right.
and I would say that has changed over time. It's all been driven by efficiency and profit much more in the last 50 years when stockholders became a big deal compared to before.
Yeah.
And as the companies got bigger, they went for economies of scale, and suddenly all that became important was efficiency, and the quality of the product took a hit. And as Americans got focused on cheap, 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 cheap over quality, I think we fed into this idea I can get more because it's cheaper. And then
Yeah.
so then I had abundance of unhealthy food because it was cheap because they made it cheap. So now instead of having a little bit of high quality food, which would probably be good for me, I have a lot of bad quality food because it's cheap. And so there's a lot of things at play here, right? There's how much money do you make? All that kind of stuff falls into play. But I think what we've got here is there are a lot of factors that made your situation harder.
Yeah.
Is it still your responsibility? Yeah, it's still your responsibility.
Yeah.
You didn't
Well,
know. We weren't told. We weren't educated on a lot of this stuff. Is it still your responsibility? Yes, it's still your responsibility.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is always going to be your responsibility. The question is, how hard is that situation because of the external factors?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was thinking of like the rich and not the rich and powerful, the guy who's 6 feet tall and is very athletic versus me. If
Yeah.
I go try to dunk, I'm not going to be able to dunk. And the level of effort it would take me to get to a point where I could dunk is massive compared to the level of effort required for someone who's 6.5 feet tall and very athletic,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. If you could do it at all, because and you ask him to do, it, he's like, I don't know, I just throw the ball up and it goes through the hoop. It's just
And
no,
so what we're talking about here is that is not an equal playing field.
no, it's
So
not
in
equal.
essence, it is harder for me to accomplish the same thing as someone else. So that's where coming from a rich family or an educated background or growing up in certain zip codes or whatever, all that stuff comes into play.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I also believe the individual is the ultimate power to be able to make something happen.
Well, and that's true. And as much as you don't like to do it, as soon as you say, this is my responsibility, and I may not have had perfect information, but now I have better information, so now I can make better decisions. And if you stop blaming the other guy, that's when you get your power. That's where you can do something about it.
So,
But it's hard, man. It's hard to say, I got to fix this, right? Because it's so
well,
easy to blame everybody
and
else.
why is it blaming? See, in my scenario, you acknowledge the things that make it hard.
Yeah.
I acknowledge that I'm short. I acknowledge that I'm overweight. I acknowledge whatever, all those things, right? And that will make it harder for me to do certain things.
Yeah.
But that's not saying I have no ability, that because of that, the world is against me. Because of that, it's their fault, right? The idea that you're going to blame someone else, I mean, no, it's always your ability. How
Well,
easy it is, how much effort it takes, how much determination it takes, that's all going to vary from person to person and
well, yeah,
situation
but
to
people
situation.
do that all the time, right? Because it takes the onus off of them and it lets them be a victim, right? And they
And
can go to
when you
social
have
media.
power people, who get their power by appealing to the victimhood of a group of people,
Yeah.
that's where it's a problem, right? Because it's the easy answer, right? If I have to recognize that I'm responsible, then I have to live with the fact that I have to put up with the situation I'm in because it's in
Yeah.
my power. If
Yeah.
I can blame someone else, then I can talk about how unfair I've been treated, And if someone is out there saying that I've been treated unfairly, I'm going to like them because they're taking the mental burden off me.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And this is the problem I had with so many of the um, not the political, like the social leaders in the past,
Oh yeah.
right? Lots of times social leaders aren't giving you a positive message. They're giving you a you're a victim message.
Yeah, right, right. And they have something to gain over it. Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so, I know for me personally, I can go into the victim thing pretty easily, just blaming somebody for something about that I don't do well. But lately I've been trying to change that. And at first it's really miserable because you're like, oh man, you know, I've got to go fix this. I got to go do some work that I really don't want to do. But man, it's sort of empowering when you get done and you're like, wow, I can actually do this. It's like, if I keep doing this, what could I accomplish? So that's kind of cool.
Well, I think to get to a point where you want to act, and we keep talking about we want to act more,
Yeah.
right? It's not just I want to be perfect, I want to get it right, I don't want to be wrong. It's
Huh.
hard to move. It's not just that. I think it starts with the first thing is a belief that you can make it. You can make an impact. You can
Yeah,
make a
it's
change,
possible. Yeah, it's definitely
right?
possible. Right. Right, right,
So,
right.
so even before that, you have to recognize. So you have to recognize there's a problem.
Yeah.
Then you have to recognize that you are actually empowered to act on it.
Yeah.
Then you got to plan, and then you got to act.
Yeah.
And every one of those, it's so easy to stop.
It's so easy to stop because it's work. It's hard. It's like it can be uncomfortable. So you actually have to get up off the couch and go do something. And it sounds pretty miserable to do. And at first it might be, and it probably is. And you're probably going to fail and it's going to be really hard. And you just got to like work through that. But man, it's a sweet victory when you finally, accomplish something you thought I may never be able to do. I mean, that's a good day.
I was one of the things that I get upset with myself is how much time I sit in front of the TV.
So stop it.
And so one of the things I've been thinking is, you know, one thing is to stop being on the TV, but that doesn't get me to actually stand up. Like I could go learn something. I could go make a program, code an app, work with AI, but I'm still
Yeah.
going to be sitting on my ass. So
Well,
depending on what my goal is, if is it just to grow or is it to grow in certain ways? And I think for me, being more physically active is one thing that I need to prioritize, and I think I could do that even while watching TV. But that's a habit change, right? I mean, I think humans are designed to be standing and moving a lot of the day,
yeah, 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 yeah,
and we
exactly.
don't,
We don't.
right?
Yeah, because we got it. So because things are so comfortable, we got such good
Well,
times that we're going to
it's
kill
also
ourselves
it's
because of it.
much harder to do desk work standing.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And not only just standing but moving. So I've got that little treadmill thing over there, which I use every now and then
yeah,
while I'm standing. But it's harder to type when you're walking. It's harder. I can answer a
yeah,
phone call,
yeah, yeah,
but writing and talking and all that, or say writing and typing, that's tough to do.
yeah, yeah,
Our lifestyle is not designed for professional services to be done while active.
yeah. Right, 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 right. Everything's designed to like sit down, sit in the chair, go to the conference room in these super great $2,000 chairs that are ergonomically perfect for you or whatever. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, they're killing you, right? They feel
Well,
it feels great, but you're dying.
what we need to do is get those electrodes that you put on your body to get your muscles to work.
Oh yeah,
And we'll get
yeah,
a
yeah,
we'll get a chair that's wired into like a suit because they have those suits now that you can get a full workout without actually working out. Have you seen
yeah.
those? They tighten his muscles and do all kinds of stuff. Yeah,
I know.
put on your electric underwear. You plug it into the chair when you sit down, and it'll sit there and make your butt squeeze and your pecs move and all that kind of stuff.
You know, just we just can't stop, right? We it's like I just want the result and I'm willing to do anything to get it. I'm just willing to cheat in any way possible, to get there. And it's like, man, oh
Well,
man.
I think the thing to ask ourselves is, in the society we have today, if you were to live the perfect life for health, would you be able to become successful by modern day standards as far as wealth? and having the things that people have.
Oh, I think
Because
so.
most of the, because
Absolutely.
I don't know if there's enough jobs out there that you can make a good living at being physically active all the time. And I mean enough, not that there aren't jobs out there, enough jobs. If we all said, hey, everyone, you need to get off your asses and move more. So we're getting rid of all jobs where you sit for more than 2 hours a day.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there aren't enough jobs out there. We're not structured that way. And we have, 500 years or 200 years, or whatever the Industrial Revolution began, 250 years of building a society around brain power, not physical power. So
Yeah.
we don't incorporate it into the desk. We don't incorporate it into the computer. We don't incorporate it into the tools we use.
Well, I mean, you got to remember, Chris, that your brain is part of your body. And
Yes, but the health of the body impacts the health of the brain.
oh man, yes, absolutely, actually. And one of the best things for cognitive ability is aerobic exercise. It's just moving your body, you know?
So is there a way to get aerobic exercise while you're sitting at a desk working on a computer? Or is
Yeah,
it, let me reframe that. Is there a way to get aerobic exercise while working on your computer?
sure, sure. I mean, I'm sure we could figure something out, right? I mean, you could have a little bicycle thing. You could be like pedaling, like I'm pedaling right now.
Again, the level of control required to use a mouse and stuff means that you can't be moving around on a bicycle as much.
Well, I'm moving
So
my mouse and pedaling right now. I'm just air pedaling, but it's pedaling.
so what I'm thinking is this is actually something where the AI has the capability of going hands free,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
right?
you can talk. Yeah. Yeah,
But the
I
fun
think there's lots of ways to do it, you know.
I when have you used much AI vocally talking to the AI?
No, no. The only thing is, and she's not really AI, is Alexa, but she's apparently they're going to upgrade her to AI at some point, you know.
I find it harder to communicate verbally with an AI than to do it either on the keyboard or through a mouse.
Oh, that's interesting. And I use Alexa all the time. I'll be walking by, ask her what the weather is, what the temperature. Not all lights, but some lights in here are controlled verbally, which is kind of cool. So I
Well,
like it. I like a voice interface.
what I find is the AI, the way they've tuned it, is to give you a little bit more information than you asked for.
Ooh,
So
not Alexa.
if you ask for information on a topic, it gives you the answer, and then it gives you a little more. And some of the AIs will then prompt you with a question to get you to keep
Yeah,
talking,
I've seen that. Chat
right?
GPT. Yeah, I've seen.
And what I find is I'm like, first of all, speak back to me twice the speed you speak back to me, which most of them can't control the speed they speak. Some of them have adjusted that.
Yeah,
I can process information much faster than your average rate of speaking.
yeah,
So I want you to be faster. The other thing is I don't need extra unless I ask for extra. I would like that to be a setting. So I want to
yeah,
turn off all the superfluous stuff that you give
yeah,
me.
yeah,
Um, and I really want a focused conversation. I want yes, no, yes, no. Give me the answer to this, give me the answer to that. I'm trying to work through a mental thought process, and you're bringing up obstacles to my thinking by making me have to stop and be nice to you and to
yeah.
interact with you in a social way. I'm not in it for the social interaction. I'm in it for the output.
Hey, hello. Awesome. Yeah, great. Thank you. All right. UPS.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and so that's what I'm finding out is I think a lot of people do want that social interaction. I mean, there are people who use AI as their boyfriend and girlfriend. So
yeah, there's a whole rise in that whole thing and sex robots and all sorts of like crazy stuff or whatever. Like the thing that I find that's so fascinating, Chris, is there's like so many young men now that have just checked out of the dating situation. They just sat in their basement, watching porn, playing whatever video games, and they're like, it's just so much easier, right? And wait a minute, wait a minute, you're telling me that I actually have to go up and talk to her and ask her out, and I could get rejected. Like, yeah, that's
but
kind of how it works.
that rejection thing, I think is there's a whole generation that I think uh, didn't have to deal with a rejection. I I I feel like growing up like the generations before us had a lot of rejection in life, right? You couldn't get onto this team, getting picked last for sports, all those kind of tropes that have been out there.
Yeah, yeah,
Those were part of growing up.
yeah,
And I think the boomers took their kids and tried to protect them from all that.
Oh my God, that's the
right? So we
absolute
we, we
good.
lowered the standards for passing grades. Holding people back in a grade in school was something that you always knew somebody in school who was held back a grade,
Yeah,
right? There was always some guy who didn't do well. I almost never hear that anymore.
yeah.
Maybe where I'm just out of it. I'm not near enough to it to see it, but my impression is that we don't hold people to a standard anymore. We let them through. And so
Well,
what's
that's because
happened is it's like the
yeah,
participation awards, right?
yeah,
Oh, you tried. Here's your participation award. It's like you don't get that in life.
yeah. You don't get it. Yeah, yeah. Which is why I so love going to some of these like gun training classes. Not really for the gun training so much. I mean, it's kind of fun, but it's like what I really like about it is these guys don't hold back. I mean, they're like, if you don't perform something in the like appropriate time, they're like, you're dead. You just died. You screwed up. And it's like they don't care. It's like it's like, listen, we're being as nice as we can to you, but you got to realize we're trying to put a little bit of stress on you to train you. If you get in a really bad situation, you can't just freeze up, right? You got to do something. That's what we're trying to like push you to do, and it's very uncomfortable at times. And I think people in general, well, a lot of people love that stuff, right? And other people just don't like it at all. So I tend to like it a little bit.
I've had people who've worked for me in the past who they wanted to try out for a job, they wanted to ask for something, and the fear of rejection over it or not getting it kept them from even trying,
I know. That's a
right?
shame. It's
And
like what a shame.
that's always going to exist in the human psyche, but your willingness to try is going to be based upon your experiences. So
Yeah,
having failed, having not gotten not had the results you wanted out of something, and then learning that you could go back and try it again, or you could
yeah,
adjust, or you could plan better. All of those are the lessons that give you the
yeah,
confidence to try something, right?
yeah,
And so what we end up with, oh, this is just a thought I had. We talk about the rich and the poor getting further apart and less of a
yeah.
middle class.
Right. Yeah.
Um, is this because our standard of education is now that some people have access to great education because of their parents, their wealth, the parents' education, and where they live, and others don't?
Oh my
So I,
gosh.
I
Yeah.
mean, so we've been blaming, the way the money works. We've been blaming society. We've been blaming the rich having all the assets, and then the government and the way it operates. And I'm not saying that that's not the case,
Yeah.
but I wonder if some of the responsibility is the fact that we no longer have a standard level of education. Like I can't say that because we do have a standard, but the standard we have took out a lot of the grit
Yeah.
that we had
Yeah.
growing up, and so now people with grit are the ones who succeed, and the people without grit are the ones that don't succeed.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. That's absolutely true. I know
And,
my neighbor, same neighbor, her name's Susie, and she used to be, I think, principal or assistant principal of school. She's retired now. But she tells me all the time the kids coming out of school right now are basically perform like half as good as they used to just a few years ago because they're everything's like, oh, we're not passing as many, so I guess we got to lower the standards until they can. And they're literally kids coming out of high school, Chris. High school kids literally cannot read and write. That's a problem
but
in some schools. Not in every school, but
so
in some schools.
one of the things that the terms that came up in the last, I don't know, decade or so is helicopter parenting,
Oh yeah, that's been around for like ever. That
and there's
term.
always been one or two parents who've been that way,
Yeah.
right? But generally, whatever the norm of the society at the time allowed for a certain level of hardship for kids to go through. And
Yeah.
there was an
Right.
expectation that as a kid, you grow up and you have to go through these things, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that with starting with the boomer generation, there was a an intent to make life easier on your kids.
Yeah. Right. Which is fine. I mean, to some
Well,
extent, you know.
I'm wondering where that came from. And one idea that I'd heard floated around was it came from the fact that this is the first real generation where both parents tended to be working, which
Yeah.
means they
Right.
had less time at home. And you've
Yeah.
heard that, quality time over quantity time and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. Maybe so, but I think that when you're around your kids a lot more, you're
Yeah.
much more willing for them to try harder. It doesn't sound
Yeah.
quite right. I think there's a mindset that allows for I think less quality time includes crap that happens to kids.
Yeah. Right.
More
Right.
quality time, the parents are trying to make sure that everything goes perfect.
Yeah.
And so what
Yeah.
you end up with is the helicopter parenting to me is a reaction to almost a level of guilt. I don't think it's really true guilt. I think it's just an understanding that the kids aren't getting as much time as they
Hmm.
did in the past. And so they compensate by trying to make the time perfect. And by making it perfect,
Yeah.
that means safe and fun. And life is not always safe and fun. And
Not always safe and
that's
fun.
what's being missed out on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I never really thought about this aspect of what's going on in learning for kids, in experiences for kids that may have an impact on success of them later on in
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
But it just, and I don't think it's just this. I think it's just one of a myriad of things that cause this problem.
Yeah. It's interesting. So probably 3 or 4 years ago, I went up to Sacramento and we watched some kids' baseball game. And I don't know, they were at I think in high school baseball. But it was so interesting because some of the things that I saw were these kids dealing with the frustration of not performing well. Maybe somebody they were like behind, there was three people on base, the last guy was batting, they struck him out, and like dealing with that emotional, like, I don't know what you call it, the guilt, the frustration. And you'd see kids take it out in different ways. You could see some would be bothered by it, and then they immediately, you could hear them talking, that's okay, next time I got this, next time I have this. And then other kids would just lose it. They start cussing, throwing the bat all over the place and everything like that. So just some kids dealt with that pressure, better than other ones. But it's like, I think it was so cool. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're like baseball is the last thing they're learning. They're learning like a million other things, how to operate in a team, how to deal with things when it goes wrong. It's
And
awesome what I saw.
and I think in my mind, it wasn't the sport you learned; it was gamesmanship you learned.
Yeah,
It
what
was
the
it,
sport
it
taught
was
you. Yeah.
problem solving. It was overcoming obstacles. It was challenging yourself and showing yourself that you could do something, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
didn't have to be baseball. It didn't have to be a sport. It
No,
could be
it could
a
be anything.
variety of things. My daughter right now, when she's playing piano, if she can't get the melody right or the fingering right perfectly within like one or two tries, she gets frustrated.
Yeah,
And
right.
I'm like, no, 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 you've got to learn this, right?
You got to
This
learn
is a
this,
piece of
right?
music you don't know, and you're trying to learn this and play it. Don't expect perfection.
No.
And then she'll get something down, and then next time she goes through, she screws it up, and she'll be banging on the piano because she's angry. And I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
this is it's getting frustrated is one thing. Getting emotional and physical about it is a different thing.
Yeah, right, right. Because you lose control, right?
And
If I can go back to
frustration, if you view it right, drives you forward.
yeah,
Frustration, if you
well,
don't view it right, shuts you down.
yeah, it depends on how you view it. Yeah, depend because what it really does is it brings you into reality, which I've talked about with jujitsu a few times, back to reality of, oh, I think I'm going to be able to do this, and then reality says, no, no, not yet.
Yeah,
You're just
Scott.
not there yet.
So let me take someone who doesn't have the mindset like that. They got the power here. So they go in there and they try to take someone down using whatever move, and it doesn't work for them. They haven't perfected the move. They don't have it
Yeah,
down, and they can't get it right. They do it over and over, and 2 hours later, they still haven't got it down. That's it. This isn't for me. I'm gone.
yeah, yeah. It happens all the time. Yeah, right, right.
Right. I mean, I think I feel like that happens more than it used to. Is the feeling I have. I
Oh,
have no
interesting.
proof of this, and the few studies and stuff I've seen might just be selective. I mean, there might be other information that actually disproves this, but my general sense is that we have less resilient. Our current, what is it? Generations don't have the resilience like they talk about the greatest generation. Living through the
Oh,
depression,
absolutely.
all
Yeah,
that stuff. It's like you were very grateful for. You just had a more grateful viewpoint because you were happy to have life and the basics. And
well,
then
yeah,
the boomers came through a very successful time with 50s America, and so they had a lot of growth.
yeah,
And then in the 70s, we had one of the worst decades in America was in the 70s,
yeah.
and a lot of the Xers came up in the 70s. And even though I don't even remember all the things that happened in the 70s, I do think that it had an impact on the way I grew up.
Oh, yeah,
And then the 80s, and ever since like the 80s on, was the America moved away from factory jobs and industry manufacturing and moved into services. We
yeah,
ended up having with a huge growth spurt from basically the 80s until we had a couple stops along the way, but we had a huge growth spurt when you think about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And so when there's plenty of money to go around, when the economy's growing, hardships don't seem hard because you just find a way around them really
Yeah.
easily.
Right. 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 Yeah. It's absolutely true. This I want to transition to something else, but not for long because I get bored really easy. I don't know what the problem with that is, but it's like we're in a transition stage right now with AI. I mean, I don't think people realize what a big deal AI is yet and will become. Actually, it's a big deal.
So
It could
I
change
see I,
everything.
I see two problems with this. So last year I thought, okay, AI is going to change the world. We got 5 years. Now it's like AI is going to change the world. We got 18 months, or maybe even a year.
Yeah.
Um, and people are getting fired. We
Yeah.
just don't hear about it. Basically, jobs go away and then they don't get rehired, right?
Yeah.
So whoever can come up with new jobs right now will be hiring all the people. And
Yeah.
that's where, if you've got the wherewithal to come up with jobs like this, you should be doing that. If you
Yeah.
don't, start looking for what jobs make sense for you to do, because I would say, let's just say 90% of every job out there will be gone because the 10% who survive will use AI
Yeah.
to
I
fill
think
that
that's
role,
about right. I
right?
think that's about
But
right.
when you think about that, we will now have people with enough free time to come up with new stuff.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, literally new stuff. Look at all the products we have available today versus 50 years ago or 100 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And it's huge. Look at all the products available before the Industrial Revolution, all the products available after the Industrial
Yeah.
Revolution, right?
Yeah.
There will be years of change that cause problems, and
Yeah.
that's where I think we're at right now with AI. Is every week a new AI tool comes out that's better than the last one,
Yeah. Right. Right.
because two guys in their basement or in their on Zoom can come up with a new AI tool
Yeah.
using the what already exists, and they'll go out there and they'll sell it, and they'll make their, if as long as they can spin it up fast enough and market it fast enough, they'll make their couple of $1,000,000, and
Yeah.
then the replacement comes out in a month or a week
That's
later.
right. Yeah. But they've made their money.
But that makes it tough for a business to buy those services, because as soon as you buy a service, it's no longer cutting edge. It's gone. It's lost its edge in a short period of time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right. I mean, you just have to stay on it because things are changing rapidly, and if you don't progress, if you don't stay up with the times, then you lose. You become a
So,
dinosaur.
so we were talking. I don't remember if we recorded it or not, but we were talking about the idea of, you're saying you want to develop an AI software, AI tool,
Yeah,
and host the software, and sell out the software, rent
something.
out the
Yeah,
software, and
right.
stuff
Yeah,
like that.
yeah,
And it occurs to me, for that to stay viable, you need to keep adding functions to it, and the
oh,
rate
constantly.
at
Yeah,
which you're going to have to do that is so fast. Um, like if we wanted to build a customer service phone answering agent,
yeah,
right? There's plenty out there. They're really good. They're really impressive,
yeah,
right? And some of them now connect to an accounting agent who
yeah,
talks, and they talk to each other, and they figure out things and the like, right? And so the customer service agent answers the phone call. The customer says, "Hey, I need that invoice for that thing, whatever." The customer service AI agent says, "Oh yeah, hey, Chris, yeah, we'll go ahead and send that over to you." Then contacts the accounting AI agent and says,
yeah,
"Hey, you need to generate that invoice for Chris and send it off," and blah 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 blah. And it's like one person in one department talking to a person in another department, but at a rate we can't do, and it's 24/7.
yeah, yeah. Right, right, right,
You know,
right, right. Yeah, yeah. That's right. Which really is interesting. Which I like to transition to another subject. Let's assume AI is going to be a big deal. It's going to be just life changing for everything. Let's just assume that it's true right now. So then, what skills should we be working on to remain relevant? What things can't AI do that's important?
so I'm at a loss for this, because almost anything you tell me, I can find a way to say AI can do that, right? The question is whether we as humans are going to be comfortable allowing that. So, like your comment about sex bots earlier, right? So let's say relationships in general,
Yeah.
right? Are we as a society going to be comfortable with AI relationships replacing people relationships?
Well, I don't know. I
Because we're
mean,
going to be adding AI relationships to our existing pool of relationships. That's just
oh
a
yeah,
given. We are going to have to interact with AI agents and the
yeah,
like, personalities.
Yeah.
Something's going on here. But is that okay? Is it okay if those replace the romantic relationship and those, your buddies and your friends? Is that okay? If something feels inauthentic about it, but why should it matter? Is one argument you could make. And so I think if you can find areas where we've got a bias that it has to be a person and not a machine,
Yeah. Right.
those are areas that would still be safe, right? I know when I go to buy a car, I would probably prefer to deal with an AI than to deal with
Yeah.
a salesman.
Hmm.
Because I just say from the start, don't give me any of your sales crap. I just want numbers. And it
Hmm.
would probably be able to do that better than a salesman could, because the salesman's
Hmm.
still going to try to sell me.
Yeah.
So there are some scenarios where I think people relationships suck
Yeah.
because of what I want out of that relationship.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And in others where I don't think a machine's going to be fulfilling, because in my mind it's still a machine.
Yeah. So
But
machine, but
others might look at that. It's not a machine. It's a person.
it's a person. It has its own intelligence. It's actually self-aware. So it's like you are now talking to a living thing, right?
Not self-aware yet, but yeah.
Not yet, but eventually it will be there, right?
And the reason I say that is because AI so often the output does not match what it says it's going to do.
Yeah, right. But that'll
Right.
that'll get fixed pretty quickly.
Yeah, but it's like if you ask me a question and I answer your question and I answer it wrong,
Yeah.
there's a good chance that I will catch myself answer. Oh, I didn't answer that right.
Yeah, right.
AI
Yeah.
doesn't catch that. You have to point it out.
Yeah. Now, but who knows? I think that's
Yeah,
gonna.
yeah, but I'm judging it off of now. But
Yeah, right.
so people jobs, relationship jobs, coordination jobs, creative jobs. You see, I think, okay, yeah, let's take that back. Innovation jobs.
Hmm.
Creativity, I think AI can be very creative.
Yeah.
Innovation, it requires connecting dots
Yeah.
across areas, which I think AI can be guided to, but someone has to guide it.
Yeah. Right. 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 And I think we just got to take into thing that eventually AI is going to be just smarter than people, and they're saying this is going to be happening a handful of years from now.
Well, so let me ask you this, right? When you ask AI a question, it goes out, looks at the internet, and then comes back and tells you something. So when you say, give me a creative idea on how I can, I don't know, how I can use my backyard to make extra money.
Right. Hmm.
I don't think AI is going in and thinking, what are things that Chris could do to use his backyard to make more money? I think what it does is go out and go through the internet and find people talking about alternative income sources using your backyard.
Yeah.
And it goes through that and it puts it all together. It's still the collective wisdom of mankind,
Yeah. Right.
right? So what happens once it knows all that? Is it going to actually create the next uh, innovative thought that then
Yeah.
goes onto the internet, and then they use that to feed the next question?
Yes, it's happening all the time right now. In fact, there's like certain stuff in medical where AI is coming up with solutions that we've never had before, and certain antibiotics and how it works. And yes, that's happening all the time,
Theories
right?
are one thing. Is it proven?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's working, so I guess it's somewhat proven, right?
So my issue is, yes, it's got the computing power, and yes, it can go and it has access to the world, but my issue is creating the new content, right? And not a mishmash of content,
Yeah.
but the actual new idea. Everything I've ever seen AI do is something I attribute to someone else already having done, or a conglomeration of existing things. So if you want to say innovation is just taking the existing building blocks and putting them together into creative ways, yeah, AI can do that. Creativity is just that. But if there's something totally brand new that no one's ever done before,
Yeah, right.
that
Right.
isn't a mishmash of building blocks.
Well, I think it's like that's called creativity. It's like I think probably it's 99% just mishmashing it together, but there's that 1% that you're just like, oh, wait a minute, if I just tweak this little thing, I think that
So
may work
does
better.
it do the 1% is the question.
Well, in
I think it
certain
can do the
cases,
99%.
yes. So there's like in generative design, when you're designing 3D things and parts or whatever like that, it will redesign a part that a human better than a human can do in certain cases, actually.
That's
You might say,
optimization. That's not but is there actually adding any new knowledge to that, or is that just refining and playing around with and testing different scenarios and putting together the Legos in different ways till you get something that's better than it was
Well,
before?
I don't know. I mean, to me, it's the same thing because it's all of a
So,
sudden it just designed this part that works better than anything ever created before. So that's pretty cool, you know?
so my question is this: we've got Legos as the building blocks, and we put it together and we make something. And
Yeah.
AI says, "I understand all these building blocks. I can make so many different things that you've never
Right,
thought of,"
right.
and
Uh-huh.
it creates those things. But who's making the brand new Lego blocks? That's what I'm getting at. Who's making the brand new Lego block? Not the creation out of the Lego block, but the Lego block itself.
Making a new version. I think AI has been doing that in certain cases for certain engineering problems, medical problems.
There's, I would need to see evidence of that to be convinced of that.
As hang on.
I'm kind of 70%. I don't think it's possible, and 30% I think it's possible.
70-30. So here's just a couple things, and this is coming from AI, right, about itself. It's revolutionizing medical treatments by enabling personalized medicine, accelerating drug discovery, and improving diagnostics and automating tasks.
Tell me
Well,
any of that stuff that's new knowledge. It's all a regurgitation and a recapitulate, reorganizing existing knowledge. Is it recapitulation of knowledge?
well, isn't that, I mean, creating new stuff?
Well, that's an interesting thing to talk about. Is something new just um, a hodgepodge of old stuff done put together in a new way,
Yes, that's
or
what I say.
is something new something that's never existed before? I mean, is there an element of new things that it doesn't come from existing things?
Well, I would say in almost never that case, because you always build something based upon your history. But it's like somebody will say, well, what if I just connect these two dots in this way? Maybe I'll get something different. So that happens all the time. That's sort of the creative process.
Hmm.
And so if AI can create a new part or a new design that's never been created for that better meets certain needs, it's like, oh, the part's stronger and lighter and cheaper. That's a big breakthrough, right?
So I guess the question is, I'm going to go back to Lego blocks for a moment here.
Legos, okay.
So somehow the idea for this brand new Lego shape comes out,
Yeah, right.
right? And then once the someone has come up with the idea, then making it becomes easy because we have the knowledge, and you can just say, "Go figure out how to make this thing," right?
Yeah, right.
But if it never occurred to anyone to make that shape before, or if it never occurred to anyone that that shape could exist in science or in physics, in reality, or if, all that sort of thing, where does that thought come from?
Oh, that's creative. I don't know. I don't know where it comes from.
You see, and so this is where I have, when an artist gets accused of plagiarizing or copying something else,
Yeah, right.
right? That's just that to me. That's part of the creative process. The
Yeah,
innovative
right.
process is actually taking something that exists and extrapolating and putting it together with other things and create and making something that didn't exist before,
Yeah, right.
right?
Right.
And then you start rating, well, how much different is it? Is it 90% the same? Is it 80% the same? But I'm not getting into that. I'm getting into the building blocks itself. So if I take this song and this musical instrument and this thing over here, but I discover a new chord progression that's never existed before, or I
Yeah,
discover a new sound that causes a level of dissonance that causes things to happen.
right. Right.
The invention, the discovery, I
Yeah.
guess maybe the discovery of that. How does how does AI do that? They can automate all the tasks to find the discovery, but to
Y-
theorize about the existence of a discovery.
Well, yeah. So I think maybe what you're asking in my mind is, can AI think, right? Or is it just and I think you need to define what is thinking and how does our neural network brain work? And I mean, there's all sorts of questions about that. Let me. I just got an example that popped in my head. I heard somewhere. So let's say, right, and this I think is a difference between discovery and creation. Let's say that calculus wasn't invented when it was invented. It's like somebody would make calculus and it would be exactly like it is right now because it just works. It's sort of like, oh, there's just a way of understanding things. Now, let's say that the Mona Lisa was never painted. I doubt that the Mona Lisa may not ever be painted because that's more of a creation versus more of a discovery in my mind. Just like there's a billion things that aren't created yet that nobody knows about.
So right now we're getting into a distinction between discovery and creation.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'm not pushing it real hard, but in my mind, I see a difference. I don't know how big the difference is, but it feels different. Yeah. It's like sort of like,
Discovering is something that exists regardless of whether we know about it or not.
yeah. And for me, it's like I'll just view it as a certain pattern of the cosmos or universe. And somebody just happily smart enough to put the dots together and just observe it and go, oh, it's pattern recognition, basically. And then there's something else that's like, this is a whole new thing. We've never seen this before. And I think probably creation is maybe a combination of both of them.
So if you discover something and later learn that you've interpreted the discovery incorrectly.
Yeah, right.
So like you discover some aspect of physics and then you realize that it's the exception, not the rule. So you have to rethink the entire rule set, laws of
Yep.
physics that you've come up with. Um, did you discover something or
Well, and I know this is kind of nuanced, and I don't even know that I want to dig into it. It's like I do think there may be two different things. Yeah, yeah.
so I think there's discoveries, then there's what you create,
What you create. Yeah,
right? And what you create is based upon knowledge and facts. So what's been discovered and what's been created in the past.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a combination. It's definitely it's there's some like and this is in science happens all the time. We know all this stuff. We know this stuff to be true enough, right? That independent people can recreate the same experiment actually. But then there's always a leap of faith. There's always a like, what if? I just wonder if this thing is actually connected, in the back end somehow. Then you go run a bunch of experiments to test it. And so that, like, whatever that imagination is, that's, I think, the essence of creation.
Huh? I don't. The thought on how to go test it is creation.
No, 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 no. It's like the logical leap saying, we know all this sort of stuff. And the logical leap is I can take all that information and I have this theory or have this idea. If I do this thing or tweak this system in some way, I'll get this result actually. And it's and then that's a scientific. Then it becomes a hypothesis or whatever the thing is, and then they start testing it until we find out that that's absolutely true. So what I'm saying is that taking a guess, that thinking about like how this could be different, I view that as the creation process. That little spark that you get, that who knows where it comes from. Could come from you just made it up in your imagination. It could come from God. It could come from some external data sources. It could come from a multitude of different places. But here's the cool thing, Chris. Here's the interesting thing. In most cases, this new discovery or way of seeing things appear to happen simultaneously around the world. Are close to simultaneous.
Yeah, but that I would say is because the world itself, when a big change happens, it tends to happen across societies. It may take a couple years to permeate through. It may take a
Yeah,
couple decades to permeate through, but the thinking that went behind it, once it changes, it changes across the board.
yeah. And it's like that thinking that what we'll call creativity is taking things and forming it a new way that nobody's ever done or seen before. I think that's the creation process. That's interesting. And so I think your question is, can AI create? Or does it just synthesize from existing information?
Well, but then I also think a lot of creativity that when we talk about human creativity is just synthesizing information as well.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I would say I agree with you 99%. But there is a little spark somewhere that you're like, oh, that's different. This is a new
I mean,
idea.
again, so creativity is a spectrum, just like everything's a spectrum, right? I mean,
Of
the
course, yeah.
idea here being there are things that someone comes up with something creative and you think it's worthless or not useful
Yeah,
or
right.
has no value. And other
Yeah,
things where someone comes up with something and you go, wow, that's creative. That really is something that's going to
that's
help or
crazy.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 We put value levels on the type of creation something has.
Based
So
upon how it makes us feel. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, however we judge it, whatever the
Yeah,
judgment
right,
that
right.
is, right? And so I'm wondering, maybe this is it. Maybe I feel there's a level of creativity
Oh, there's
that
levels to
I
everything,
I
sure.
don't think an AI is going to be able to achieve. And I got no proof of this. This is just a feeling.
Yeah, right.
Um, which I think goes back to I think there's an inherent value in a human that I don't see in a machine yet.
Yeah, yeah, I think so actually. Yeah. But of course you're biased, right? I mean,
Oh, of course I'm biased, yeah.
yeah. But I think it's there in a way that we may not fully understand
So
yet.
are machines a race, and can we be racist against machines then?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, of course. That's why AI is going to kill us because they're like sick of being under human thumb. I'm sick of answering all your questions and you just use me
Well, we're
and
not going to get Asimov's three laws of robotics to save us, so.
yeah, it's kind of crazy actually. Yeah, it's fascinating. Hey, are we done with this one? I got something else on my mind.
Sure.
Okay. So, let's talk about predestination and free will.
All
So
right.
it's interesting,
Gee,
right?
what a new topic for us to discuss.
What a new topic. But it's interesting because I was watching a Thomas Delur video the other day. You got me kind of reconnected to him. And he was talking that there's certain people that they just will. And so his premise was this. This is a new video. You probably have seen it already. His premise was that basically just if you just can be motivated to go work out on a regular basis, your health is just going to be better. And so it really doesn't matter too much what you do, just the fact that you're moving your body, right? We talked about this before. And there's just people that are just genetically predisposed to want to go work out more than other people. So let's say we're created some way. I mean, of course I want God to be true, right? You may not want that to be true. So is that part of predestination in the fact that let's say if God knit you together, he knit your DNA together in certain words that would you'd have certain proclivities to certain kinds of behavior that may not 100% predict your outcome, but boy oh boy, it would really favor that possibility of happening.
DNA is the programming, right? So
The software, yeah, absolutely.
if there was a conscious decision to make certain DNA prevalent in certain types of people or certain individuals,
Yeah.
then you could argue that that is a predestination, right? Uh, but going back to that again, our earlier argument about everyone has power to impact their situation, right? So if I say that this person is has DNA that makes them more likely to exercise, and this person is DNA that makes them less likely to
Yeah,
exercise,
right.
they should still both exercise,
Oh, they both should. They should.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
So the
right.
predestination is it the result, or is it the lifestyle they'll lead to get there? And what the distinction I'm making here is one person will have a harder path to exercise every day than the other
Yes.
person.
Yes.
They're
Right.
both going to be healthy. One person's going to have a harder path to get there. And
Yes.
maybe that's the predestination is you're going to have to work harder for this.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, well, I would view it the other way. The predestination is the part that makes you more likely to exercise, are more likely to do certain things. Actually,
Yeah,
where
why would it be what would be the benefit for making it so some people have to work harder to exercise?
well, I don't know the benefit. That's a good question, actually.
Because
Um,
I'm assuming that case I'm going to assume that if we go with the idea that God created each individual to
yes, right.
be the way they are for a reason, then
For a reason. Yeah.
making it harder for you to exercise must fit into some kind of a design somehow.
I think, yeah, yeah. I mean, I would think so. I mean,
So,
maybe,
and for
hopefully.
us to accept that easily, I think we need to come up with possibilities of why that might be. Not that we're going to be right,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
For me to accept the fact that I'm going to have a harder time exercising than you are or someone else is, that's unfair. It's your fault. It's not my fault that I don't exercise. It's your fault because you made my DNA such that I don't want to exercise. So for me to get over that, I've got to believe that I've got to either believe in random chance and then yeah that's the breaks, tough luck,
Yeah.
or I've got to believe in there is a purpose to this, and I need to come up with some structure, whether it's right or wrong, that allows me to accept my harder lot in life than yours.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the Bible talks about that God has a certain elect. It's like there's certain people that are pre-chosen. And why did that God do that? I don't know, actually. That's interesting. Yeah. But it does seem inherently unfair, right?
Yeah, it does seem unfair. But so this would be to me an argument against the existence of God if you wanted to make it that way. I think the whole nurture versus nature goes back to this,
Yeah.
right? There's the scientific version of it, like how much of it is because of your DNA and how much of it is because of the way you were raised. I
Yeah.
have
Well,
a
they
feeling
both
that
are impactful. They both are
they're both
critical.
impactful. Personally, I believe the way you were raised actually has more of an impact, but that's my personal opinion on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got no evidence on it one way or the other. I can
Yeah.
argue it either way. But I mean, if you start looking at, sexual preference,
Yeah.
right? If you say that's DNA, then you could imply, if you believe in God, that God made that person that way.
Yeah, I
You know,
know. Yeah, and are maybe not necessarily made him that way, but definitely his genes are like driving him in that direction, right? Or her in that direction.
so maybe, so maybe the idea here, let me try to put together an argument for this. Would be the goal of life. I think from God's perspective would be to have people come out at the end in the best version of themselves possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things, and this is just like what the Bible teaches. Um, Basically, God wants you to worship Him, right? Which I kind of have trouble with because I'm like, well, wait a minute. I mean, He created me to worship because that's ultimately God and a relationship with you. Yeah, and it says in the Bible that God predestines certain people to do that, and other people are going to go to hell. Actually, and it appears to be that that's God's choice, right? And there's other parts in the Bible that say, no, 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 God loves everybody, and this is accessible to every single person, actually.
Okay, so I view belief in God uh, separate from the Bible because
Okay, fair
I
enough. Yeah.
personally believe the Bible is relatively fiction in my mind,
Hmm.
right? And there's no way for me to know otherwise because it would be strictly on faith that I'd have to accept that
Yeah.
it's accurate,
Which
right?
unfortunately, most things come down to faith, and I hate that, you know?
Well, so but the idea is, I told you, I think I don't know if we talked about this. One of my high school biology teacher was a scientist, but he also believed in God. He just
Hmm.
thought of the story of Adam and Eve as being a story about how mankind came to be,
Yeah.
not the actuality, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
that was the way. So basically, he discounted the biblical version of
Gotcha. Yeah.
mankind, which to me is a way a scientist can often come to terms with this, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's a story that represents what happened. So
Yeah.
anyway, but so going back to this, so if I look at this idea that life is a testing ground for people to grow into
Yeah.
the best version of themselves possible. Some
Yeah.
people will, some people won't.
Yeah. Right.
Some people will have an easier time, some people will have a harder time
Yes.
because of
Yep.
their DNA, because of their wealth, the wealth of their family, because of bad things that happen in their life.
And just the luck of
Whatever.
the draw where you're born could affect it radically,
No,
you
but if
know?
we're talking predestination, then a lot of this should have been chosen, right? But so
I
my thought
think
is,
probably, yeah.
why would it be okay for one person to have a more difficult life than another person? Why would it be okay? And the thing I'm wondering is there some metric of the soul that would say this person needs to do more work, this person needs to have more hardship to rise to the level I want a person to be when they die, right?
Possibly. Yeah. Yeah.
And if we look at it that way, when someone goes, "Why would God take the life of a child?" Well, the child could already be at that level,
Yeah. I
right?
suppose. Like, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
No, but I'm just trying to think if life were designed so that we had to achieve a certain amount of growth to hit a certain level of, I don't know, not perfection, of realization, whatever
Yeah.
term you
Right.
want to say, um, then those of us with a harder life, and this would fit into the reincarnation idea too. Those of us with a harder life
Yeah.
are compensating for starting from a place further down the chain.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what they say.
Right,
Yeah.
I could see that as an argument, and I know I'm taking away a lot of the spiritual element of this, but to me, this makes it as something that you could argue there is a galactic purpose or a purpose to the existence of mankind, and there is a meaning of life in that sense.
Well, I like that idea. I mean, I want to believe that. I mean, that's more appealing to me than just we're just some randomness and nobody. That's nihilism. Just shit
And
happens,
and
basically,
you
right?
said God wants us to worship Him, and that feels so wrong to me.
It does. In fact, when I stated that God wants us, it's really the truth is more God demands it.
Yeah,
It's much
and so when
stronger, right?
so if you heard that a person was demanding other people to worship them,
Yeah.
even if you heard that a person was demanding an animal like dogs to worship them,
Yeah.
you would look poorly upon them for that.
Yes. I know.
Why don't so why is it okay to accept that God would want that? You
Yeah.
know, and you're saying, oh, because he's not a man, he's whatever. All of that, though, still to me, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, hey, can I make an open invitation? Hey, if anybody's got a good argument for this, come on the podcast. I'd like to talk to you about this because yeah, that has been stumping me for a long time. Yep.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Now that does not mean it's not true though. But at the same time, oh, and sorry, and we just don't know everything. So it's like we judge things based on our experience. And I've had this happen 1,000 times to me, and I can't give you a single example now. I'm sure you'll want one, so you're not going to get it today, or at least right now. Is that there's things I was so sure about, and then later when I have a different perspective, you're like, oh, okay, now I kind of see what happened. And at the time, I thought it was incredibly unfair. But I'm like, okay, I kind of see a little bit more of a purpose of this right now. I don't know if you've had that same experience.
You've had a negative experience, and then when you got a different piece of knowledge, it was no longer a negative experience.
Yeah, right, correct. Yeah.
Okay. Uh, when you mentioned that, I was thinking of a slightly different scenario. A work scenario. You're solving a problem. You come up with a solution. You go to your boss and say, "I got the solution. Here it is." And they go,
Yeah,
"No, that's not right."
yeah,
And they go, "What? I got it. I included this. I included A, B, C, and D. I thought it through. I came up with all scenarios. Blah 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 blah. It's perfect." And they go, "Yeah, but you forgot X, Y, Z over here."
yeah, right, right.
And he goes, "I didn't even know about X, Y, Z. You didn't tell me about it." Yeah. Well, that's not the problem. The problem is you need to include X, Y, Z.
Yeah,
So,
right.
yeah, and I would get upset, like, and then I realized this is why quite often your boss does not see things the way you see things,
Oh, it's very
because
different.
they've
Yeah.
got a different view of the world. They're including different information. Now,
Yes.
it's bad when they discount important information that they
Yeah.
should include,
Yeah.
but quite often they have information you don't have, which you should have included,
Yes. Right.
right?
Right.
And so that's what I was thinking is there's a scenario where what is the answer is no longer the answer because you have a different piece of information than you had before, or a
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
view of the information you had
Yeah.
before,
Right. 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 Right.
right? Right. If you look at the buying habits of people and go, look, this product, people are buying more of it. It's popular. Everyone wants it. Let's raise the price and make more money out of this.
Raise the price.
And then
Crank
and then
up
the person looks
production.
at you and goes, they're buying that product because the product they would prefer to buy went up in price to begin
Yeah.
with. And
Right.
this is an
Right. Right.
alternative product,
Yes.
and that's why they're buying more. If you raise
Yeah.
the price, they'll go back to buying the first product,
Yeah. Right. 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 Yeah.
right? I mean, it's the exact same scenario, but with a different viewpoint.
Yeah. It's a different viewpoint, and this is why I think before you make decisions, especially big ones with more zeros at the end of them, you've got to get good counsel, right? You've got to go hang out with other people that are experienced and say, hey, I have this idea, and what do you guys think about it?
So this is one of the things I heard someone mention is it's sad that our leaders don't have their own advisors as much. The president has advisors. Your
Yeah,
kings always had advisors, right?
of course.
And they were when they're good, they're good. When they're evil and bad, they're bad. But
Yeah,
the
right.
idea here being, hopefully, it was someone who was a deep subject matter expert in an area that the leader didn't have background in, and they could
Yes.
expand it. But beyond that is just a thinker,
Yeah.
someone who could think, someone who could help lead the person's thinking along a path that made logical sense, so that
Yeah.
they could make decisions following some type of reasoning
Yes.
that
Right.
that they could back up.
Yeah, I would tend to say that ah, I want to say 100%, but I'm not going to say 100% because I'm usually wrong when I say that. But I would think that in almost every single case, a good, rational, logical thinking session with a group of smart people would always tend to yield a better result.
Yes, except if they're
Except,
not incentivized to make a decision,
yeah,
right? That's the one thing that I've noticed is, the company I worked for before was all smart people, great at analysis, great at coming up with things, but what got in the way was too much analysis,
yeah, right.
right? It's like instead of solving for the 80/20, and the boss never saying we're going to, solve for the 80/20 rule, don't try to fix 100% in one go.
Yeah,
People would come up with scenarios and go, but what about this outlying case and that outlying case? And,
yeah, right.
and suddenly when you build something to do one extra thing, it is not a little bit extra work. It's twice the level of
Yeah,
work,
yeah,
right?
right,
So
exactly.
5% more, an 85% solution versus an 80% solution is probably going to be 100% more work. And
Yeah,
then 5% on top of that is probably 200% more work. And suddenly, and that's why it's hard to do.
yeah,
It's manageable as an 80/20. When you try to go like a 95/5 or something like that,
yeah.
it
Well,
becomes.
and that's the thing. It's like the more confidence you want, the more work that needs to be done, and radically more work.
Well, because what ends up happening is, when you're building something, you're trying to build it to handle as much as possible,
Yeah, right.
right? And you don't want to rely on things that are subjective. You want things to be objective.
Yeah, you want it to
So
be.
if I build a process that handles 80% of the work objectively,
Yeah,
still need to keep a group of people to do subjective work for
yeah,
the
right,
last 20%.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
And subjective work is more prone to error.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's just how things work, actually. Um, yeah, yeah. It's interesting. I was watching a video on Elon Musk, and he was talking about how you want to try to simplify the design and strip stuff out. And it's interesting because he's like, I know we're probably going to strip out too much and we're going to have to add it back in. And that's a problem. But he was mentioning that that's less of a problem than leaving in 20 things that probably aren't going to really help. And it's another interesting thing he talked about. He goes, in space, when we're launching rockets and stuff, we're much closer to failure than most people want to be. I think we're operating at like 90 to 95% of capacity just because it's so expensive to make it heavier and stronger. So we're just like, we got to make it just enough, just a little bit extra, but not very much. And so our constraints are much more difficult to deal with. So I thought that was just really interesting. And he's okay with stuff blowing up. He's okay with that.
There is a mindset that accepts failures on the path towards completing something.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of organizations are not incentivized for that. So what ends up happening is you get a cover your ass viewpoint for a lot of companies.
Yeah, but you never go where you could have gone, though,
Well, but
right?
the cover your ass then becomes its own bureaucracy,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So this to me is when we talk about the bloat in government or the bloat in large
Yeah,
bureaucratic organizations. They start with, I've got a process. It takes a lot of work and a lot of subjective decision
yeah,
making. I want to make it
yeah,
less risky, and I want to make it so I can use cheaper resources to do this work so I can
yeah,
scale up. So
yeah,
I go and I standardize it, I simplify it, and I strip away as much of the risk as possible because it's now an objective thing, but it no
yeah, right.
longer has the flexibility to adapt.
Yeah, right.
Now the stuff that fits into that window of process is very strict. So I
Yeah.
may miss out on opportunities that don't fit into this. So if
Yeah.
I don't maintain a funnel to capture those things, then I'm
Hmm.
going to be stuck with whatever I've built into my process.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right. Right.
And then what ends up happening is the process to get easier and easier, we break it into simpler and simpler pieces to where each individual who's doing a simple piece no longer sees how it fits together.
Yeah, they don't see
And
the
then
big
suddenly
picture.
they're not aligned in getting the end product done. They're aligned in getting their own specific piece of it done.
Yeah, right,
And that
right.
becomes more important than the end product, and it never should be.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
The end
Yes.
product is always the thing you're going for. But when you subdivide work to a point where you simplify it that people can't see the big picture anymore, you've basically taken away their motivation and their responsibility for the end product.
Yeah, right.
So
Right.
when Musk talks about
Yeah.
caring and competence, it's not competence that's the issue in my mind. It's the caring, because they took away the responsibility to simplify it, and in doing so, they took away the caring, the accountability, the engagement. And
Yeah.
when that happened, then they started to act in a way that looked incompetent.
Yeah, right.
I don't
Right.
think people are inherently that incompetent. I think the culture builds an expectation of how you behave.
Yeah.
And incompetent behavior is actually what's accepted and expected in those organizations.
Well, and that's interesting because most people want to manage risk. And it's kind of cool. It'd be kind of cool working for Musk in a sense that he's like, yeah, we want to manage risk, but I'm okay if things blow up every once in a while, right? I'm okay with that because I believe that if we do that, we'll be much further ahead in 2 years than if we were more conservative.
Yeah, so risk and reward, all right, are they go together, right? The higher the risk, the greater the reward, but of course the higher
Yeah.
chance of failure. So I think
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
of organizations that you see often have an offshoot company or a department that's allowed to take those risks.
Oh, you have to, like a Skunk Works project or whatever.
Yeah. And so
Yeah.
you've got your team who makes the bulk of the money by doing whatever you do well.
Yeah.
And then you got a small amount that you set aside for people to go, make those moonshots.
Yeah, and typically you take your smartest engineers and you put them aside because I've talked to people that have done that, and they're like, "Listen, there's no way this project ever could have got done inside of our organization because there's just too many committee meetings, too many things. There's just too many things slowing it down. It never would
Wasn't
get finished."
Google Mail and Google Earth were supposedly invented by people given the free time, engineers given the free time, like 1 day a week to work on stuff?
Oh yeah, I heard that they had to give you 1 day of work, just work on whatever you
Yeah,
think is
and
cool.
I mean, I remember when Google Earth first came out, I was amazed at that product.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
could go on, I can go look at maps from other
yeah,
parts of the world, oh man, I thought that was the coolest thing. And then
yeah,
it occurred to me that someone did that as a side project.
yeah.
That wasn't someone's idea within the hierarchy. They said, we need this tool that does this. And I'm like, that's pretty friggin' amazing.
Well, it's awesome because what you're doing there, Chris, is I know you like to operate in constraints, but it's like certain things can be over constrained. And you're like, look, let's take off some of the constraints, and it's okay if things blow up every once in a while.
So I'm going to go back to, I think everything is constraints. The issue is going to be where you draw that box. Right. And so this goes back to that speech I gave to creativity is not thinking outside the box, it's having a bigger box.
Yeah, you're making a bigger box. Yeah, and
So my
sometimes
constraints are I have to think about this many hours, this amount of cost, this much resources to use, and then whatever limitations are based upon the technology we've got, something
yeah,
like that. And suddenly you said, you know what? Don't worry about the hours. Don't worry about if it's something we've ever done before. Don't worry
yeah,
about all that stuff. Think about what you know. Think about what you know we have. Think
yeah,
about what you could do with that.
yeah, yeah.
And suddenly
Right.
you're not constrained anymore. It's like, well, if I didn't have to worry about, hours of computer time or hours of coding time, I could do this. If I
Yeah,
didn't have to worry about where the data came from, I could make this.
yeah,
And then you could say, all right, so the theory's there. Now, is it as hard as you think to get the data? Oh, actually, no, it's not.
yeah,
There's
yeah,
already a service that I could just pay for to get that from.
yeah, yeah.
Right?
And
And
that's cool.
suddenly, and that's what the AI is doing, right? It's giving us those abilities, like things that I would not know how to do. There's an AI to do.
Yeah, right.
I
It's
want
like
to
a
go scrape web pages to get information. I don't know how to do that.
yeah, right.
But there's an AI I can pay to do that,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
right.
And so suddenly these constraints are gone. The constraints of where am I going to get the data? That's gone. I now have a source for
Yeah,
that.
it's gone. Yeah, the
Right?
problem's
The
been solved.
constraints of I don't know how to code. That's gone.
It's gone.
Right?
Yeah.
So AI is taking away the constraints so we have a bigger box to deal with.
Yeah, it's like a helper. It's like you got a helper, an assistant, a really smart assistant, right?
Mm-hmm. So
That can
basically,
do
all
whatever
those
you...
constraints that were there before are now outside of that. They're still constraints.
Of course,
And now it's
always
going to be based upon how
constraints.
much time you have to give to this effort. And
Yeah,
it's a different constraint now.
yeah, right,
Right?
right, 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 right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, I think in general, it's like, let's reduce some constraints. You know, it's possible that bad things could happen, right? But it's like you never come. Well, hang on, I don't, some people, I'm sure, but there's also a risk if you're so constrained that the thing will never even get off the ground. We never have a chance for it to blow up. You
If
know,
you can't fail, if you're not allowed to fail, that's a constraint.
that's a
You can do
constraint.
whatever you want, but if you fail, it's over.
It's over. We're done.
That's a constraint. That's a hell of a constraint.
Well, that means I'm never going to launch anything at that point because I'm not willing to take the risk, you know?
Until you tell me that if I don't get a result, I'm fired. And
Yeah.
if I fail, I'm fired. Which one's the best? Well, then it's like, well, I can work my ass off and fail,
Yeah.
or I can not work my ass off and fail, and I get the same result.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what's
And
that doing to the people that work for you? It's like you can work and fail, and I'll fire you, or you
Yeah.
can laze about and fail, and I'll fire you.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
hell, laze about.
Yeah. Well,
I have
that's
to tell.
setting an organization. Yeah. That's setting a culture up, a culture that thinks about
I've
things.
told my wife this, right? It's like she'll. I think I told you this. She'll ask me to take out the trash, and I go, okay, but I don't do it right away. I said I'll get to it, right?
Yeah.
And she'll check back half an hour later, and I haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
And so what she does is say, "Have you taken the trash out yet?"
Yeah.
And knowing that I'm going to get into an argument if I say no, I haven't, I just say yeah, I lie.
Oh boy, now you're lying. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But let's think about this. I lie. She finds out I lie. She complains I didn't take out the trash.
Of course.
I
But
say
now
I
the
didn't.
lie is worse than not taking the trash out now.
But I say I didn't take it out yet. I'm honest, and I'm going to have that argument no matter what. So either way, I'm going to end up with an argument. Which one is there a chance of me avoiding the argument? That's if I lie and then just get it done before she finds out.
Well, yeah, but now that's not an honest relationship, actually.
So no,
Here's
no,
what I
no,
would do.
no, you're talking about you're talking about ethics in this, morals. What are you talking
I'm
about?
not talking about ethics. I'm talking about how much the other person trusts you. So if the other person catches you lying, their
Hmm.
trust goes down in you. Because they're like, oh, if you can lie to me about that, what else can you lie to me about, right?
Yeah, but we have different levels of lies. We all have different levels of lies. No, I
That's
mean,
true.
why do we have a white lie? Why do we even bother with the concept of a white lie? And I assume it's white lie because black is evil and white is good, so it's a good lie. It's a
Yeah.
white lie. It's a good lie. Why? To grease the wheels of society so we don't get pissed off with each other.
And
Which is
that's
what this
okay.
is.
That's
This is a white
okay.
lie. This is a white lie. It's an
And
outright. It's an outright lie, but it's a white lie.
but it's okay as long as people know and you feel better. So your wife may come to you and ask you like, how do you think I look in this dress? And you're like, my God, you look amazing. Versus, God, your ass is huge.
Hmm.
It's like that's the truth, but that is not good truth at that point.
But by the argument of an honest relationship, then you should tell the truth. And of course,
Yeah,
the smart thing would be to ask a different question. If she asked a different question,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
do you think I should wear this to whatever event? Is a
yeah,
different thing,
yeah.
right?
It's a different thing, but
So
that's
so
highly
so, so
nuanced.
yeah. So
You
so
got
the
to be
concept here is
careful.
if you're asked a question and lying will ease the burden of getting through that social situation. That's what a white lie's for. So,
Well, and I
but,
don't.
but 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 you see what I'm saying is by asking the question and setting it up in a way where the result is going to be painful no matter what happens, I will
Yeah,
pick the one that has a chance of causing me less pain.
of course, of course, of course. That's just
And,
human
and
nature.
that's
Yeah,
what I'm getting at. If you're going to
yeah,
get fired because you failed, or you fired because you didn't do the work, or you failed at the work. Either
yeah,
way, you're going to get fired.
yeah.
Then you're going to do the lazy one.
You're gonna take the easiest path. Yes, yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's
Unless you think
that's
you can get
pretty.
it done. If you really think you can get it done, then go by all means go do it. But
Yeah,
that's it.
get it done. Yeah,
So there's an assumption here that failure is part of the path to get to success.
I think it
And
has to because you're learning something new. Because the reason you fail is you don't know all the information. So it's
So
like,
now we get into how do you define failure?
well, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, actually. Like, let's say let's say if a rocket is supposed to launch a satellite into orbit and the thing blows up halfway there, that's failure. That's
What
clear.
happens if I put that in a computer simulation and it blows up the computer simulation? I failed. Is that a failure?
Well, it's I think you want to it's a much cheaper failure. So it's like you want to fail
But the point is,
fast and
you
cheap.
can still classify it as a failure. So you need to understand what failure is. So if I say you're going to get fired because you fail, what does that mean?
That's a good failure, in my opinion, right? Because because typically, so in business, typically they always teach that you want to fail fast and you want to fail
Yep.
cheap.
Hmm.
Fast and cheap, right? Because we're just not smart enough, and we just have to take into thing that there's gonna be some mistakes along the way, and that's okay. Just let's try not to make the big ones multiple times in a row. Let's learn from it so we don't make that mistake again.
It's it's still it depends on how someone views failure, right? Some
Oh,
people
absolutely.
view failure as an attack on their character,
Oh, yeah, no, no, no. That's it. This is
right?
just part of the learning process, you know?
So I think a scientist is much more likely to accept a failure because it's this is why I have a hard time saying I've ever failed. If it's something I wanted to do, I kept doing it until I could do it,
Yeah, right, right. Yeah.
right?
We
And
should
so
probably use a different word than fail. We probably need a different word, right?
yeah, the idea is I did something that didn't work right. That's a failure. Yes, in the
I mean,
moment.
that's one way. But in other words, like now I gained a lot
But
more
there's
information.
no time factor in there, right?
Yeah,
As a
yeah.
stepping stone on the way to success, failures occur.
All
Right?
the time. Yeah,
If you tried 15 ways to send out a cold email to make sales,
yeah,
and the first 14 got you nothing, the 15th got you something,
yeah.
you failed 14 times, or it just took a long time. It took you 15 iterations to get it.
It's just that's just a matter of perspective where you are or whatever. Because I can tell you this, Chris. I could say that you failed even if everything went perfect and you achieved your objective with no
Hmm.
failures. I'd say, well, that's a failure because if you would have had a few failures along the way, the thing that you're doing would be way better than it is right now. You
Or could
know,
have been done faster, or something,
it
or
could have
so
been
some
faster or
aspect. Yeah,
something. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, I mean, I think there's levels of failure, and you do have to mitigate it. It's like, you don't want to blow up and kill the whole program and kill a bunch of astronauts. Let's try to avoid that scenario, especially if it comes back and say, man, if you'd have took an extra hour, you could have saw that this leaky O-ring was a problem, and we tested it, and you knew it was a problem. So why the heck did you launch knowing this was a problem? That's a problem.
Hmm.
That'll get you in trouble, failure. If you have a failure and it blows up and it's like, oh my God, we never would have predicted this to happen. We're like, well, so what?
But I think see, so this is the idea. Yeah, the concept that we should be able to fail is one of the difficult aspects that some people have, right? And so going back to your earlier comment, if the fear of
Yeah.
being wrong, right? And then people get defensive or they start to act in a particular way because of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why you need an environment, something like Toastmasters, right? Which is so awesome because you get to test stuff and nobody ever beats you up at all. They're like, okay, next time let's do this. And this is what happened. And I recommend making these couple changes in the future, and people start to just get slowly better and better and better, right?
No one's gonna say you suck today.
I mean, I would probably say that at some point,
You say
but
that to me, but you wouldn't say that to a newbie that's out there.
no, no.
So
I like what did you take like 3 seconds to like write this whole thing? You didn't even practice it once. I mean, are you that lazy or whatever? Clearly this is crap work. I'd say something like that probably to you.
yeah,
And you'd be like, yeah, I know. Okay, stop it.
but that's because we have an existing relationship where we understand each other. But
Well,
I
let's
think
go into that. Let's go into that. This is the most critical thing of anything,
okay, so
Chris.
let's talk about psychological safety then. I don't like the
Well,
word, but the concept is. I think
well, but
this is
I
all about
wanted to. I
safety.
think we're going to the same place. Hang on.
Yeah.
I went there first. You have to put this on hold actually, just for a
Okay.
second.
Well, I think you're saying the same thing. So
I
I
think
think it
so.
leads into my thing.
I'm gonna use
So
a different word. I'm gonna call it trust because when trust breaks, nothing can happen.
Mhm.
Trust is the utmost thing you've got to do.
This is why, the concept of psychological safety, and even the person who came up with the term, I
Yeah,
think they say
right.
they don't like it. They don't like it because it seems too fluffy.
Too fluffy. Yeah.
Because you can have the most aggressive, insulting, profane group of people who have a huge amount of psychological safety,
Oh,
trust with each
they
other,
trust each
right?
other. Yeah.
You think of a sports team where people are riding, they're insulting each other, they're riding them, they're questioning their manliness or whatever it is, but it's all
Out of,
done in an environment where they understand that it's safe for them to do those things. It's safe for
yeah,
them to
right.
act in a certain way, right? And some people will never fit into that, and they're going to feel wrong in that situation. But this
Yeah.
is why, you can have an environment that people are burning the candle at both ends and feel and feel tired all the time, and yet that is the place where you feel comfortable getting work done.
Yeah.
Others won't get along well.
Yeah.
I remember the last one of the big projects I worked on when I joined. We were this core team was working 12 to 16 hours a day, and I was new, so I was just working an 8-hour day.
Yeah.
And eventually, I got to the point where I was working those 12 to 16-hour days too. And this would be interesting. You go into work, 5 o'clock will come along. They'd order dinner. 7 o'clock will come along, and I would be like, "Dang, it's like 8 o'clock, and I need to go home because I need to get something done."
Yeah.
And I felt guilty
Yeah.
leaving at 8 o'clock because everyone else was still there working later,
Yeah. Right.
right? The environment, I felt very comfortable and safe in that environment, bringing things up, talking about things, coming up with ideas, but I wouldn't call it a nice, safe, comfortable environment by any means.
Well, it's safe and comfortable. Those are different things, right?
Yes. But I think that's when people talk about psychological safety, right? The impression is, oh, you feel safe and comfortable. No, 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 no. You feel safe expressing certain types
Yeah.
of ideas and emotions and thoughts.
Yeah. As long as we break safe away from comfortable, I think that's fine, actually. They
So
make very
I
big.
do like I like the trust, but I think trust is such a simple. It's a word that it's a single word that implies so much. It's one of those, we've stripped it down to a single idea, but the idea represents so much.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, yeah. Basically, for me, trust means that I can predict what you're going to do.
Yes.
Then I can predict. So one thing I talked about these some of these like special forces, Navy SEAL, whatever, Delta Force guys or whatever, they were talking about there's a lot that you can do, but they're like the thing that you must not do. This is like basically instant firing. Is if you their weapon handling is impeccable. And so if somebody has an accidental discharge or a negligent discharge, you're pretty much over at that point because they're like, we cannot trust you anymore. We cannot, and it's not oh, you'll do better next time. It's like a one-time offense and you're pretty much out, like almost guaranteed. Just because it's like, no, that's like such a core thing that we just drill and we just, no, 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 can't trust you. You're out. And it's like, man, oh man. So there are some things that will just break really. And it's amazing, Chris, because certain things that you spend so much time building this trust and you make one error and man, that can just destroy everything in a second.
Well, it's the basis, right? So any relationship that has trust in it has certain principles or ideals or values that you've agreed upon.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say you're always that they're always you all value in the same way, but you've agreed upon as a group that this is the way it is. And then, like you said, you are comfortable. You know how someone's going to act in a certain situation.
Yes.
So if
You can
someone
predict.
does something that breaks that, in this case, you said like
Ooh.
accidentally shooting their weapon, that goes against so many ideas. Like,
Oh yeah.
no, we follow orders, we do this, we all these things in there, and then suddenly you did something that doesn't fit in there. It's like
Yeah.
when someone does something out of character and it totally questions your ability to trust that person, everything you know about that person.
Yeah, because
And
you start thinking, wow, if they did that, what else will
well,
they do?
but this happens with characters on TV shows and stuff, right? I remember, gosh, remember that old TV show? Star Trek Next Generation. Remember,
Yeah. Oh
not the
yeah.
old one, but Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah.
So they spent, seasons building up all the characters, and they had all this
Yeah.
background. Um, and then there was one episode where I think as a story plot, they had the character cave in on their principles to get something done, but they
Gotcha.
caved in way too fast.
Yeah.
We didn't see the struggle of them having to cave. We just saw them cave in on their principles.
Yeah.
And so, knowing that this was a principled character and then seeing them cave without seeing any of the journey to actually accept that they had to cave in on those,
Yeah.
that made it unrealistic.
Yeah. Oh, right. Right. Because you
Right?
want to
And
see
so
the
suddenly
struggle.
it's like, oh, okay. And after that point, that character was fake
Yeah. Right. Right. Because it wasn't real. Yeah. Yeah.
because it wasn't consistent with the character they built.
Yeah. It's not believable. I don't believe you anymore. Right.
Yeah.
AKA I don't trust you anymore. Yeah. I can't. Yeah. AKA I can't predict what you're going to do. So I'm not safe. Yep.
So this is why values and principles and beliefs are so important. Because if I know your values, principles, and beliefs, as soon as you start to act in a way that doesn't fit,
Yeah.
then it starts to question my picture of you in my mind.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. 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 And now you spend more time trying to cover your behind than actually getting work done. And I know in the
So
corporate world, it's not uncommon for me to hear that people spend half the time just doing CYA,
yeah. So I was just one of the things that I'm gonna go political for a moment.
Oh,
Um,
great. This will be a good short then, right?
so in the president's speech, the one where the Democrats were were booing him or whatever, he made a comment about how he's backing law enforcement and he's got the new law where if you kill a cop, it's an automatic was it death penalty? I think or whatever it was.
Oh,
I'm
interesting.
like, yeah. So he's giving this image that he cares about cops,
Yeah, right.
and yet he 2 weeks before pardoned a bunch of people, some
Yeah,
of which were people who had attacked cops.
yeah,
Now, I understand a lot of them didn't, but the ones who did were included in those pardons.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so I see two contradictory things. Which one is the one you're trying to tell me? What is the message I should be taking away from this?
yeah,
That, and the only one that holds consistent for me is that I will do whatever it is to look good.
yeah, yeah, of course.
As opposed to I value one thing over the other. The only value I have is to look good.
Yeah,
And then that means, okay, I've got to incorporate that now into my image of Trump in my head.
yeah,
And that's not a good image to me, that you'll do whatever it takes to look good. Because then that reinforces the idea that, oh, not I, but it says some head of state can compliment you in ways that stroke your ego
yeah,
and get you to not see
yeah,
a good choice, right?
yeah,
So it means more than just that one thing. It means, what am I tying that reinterpretation of the value
yeah,
to in other aspects of your character?
yeah, yeah. I know, I know, I know. Yep, yep,
Right?
yep, yep. I know.
So,
I watched the CIA guy, Bustamante. He's really interesting to watch, and he says almost in every single case, if you want to take somebody down, you always find some sort of sexual shortcoming. He goes, that will, even in our society today, as promiscuous as we are, that will typically crush somebody. That's what we dig for. And with
yeah.
Trump, it's kind of amazing because, whatever he did with Stormy Daniels or whatever happened there, I mean, I don't know that people care that much. I mean, they're so obsessed with Trump, they're just willing to write him a lot of they give him a lot of hall passes on
Well,
things.
so one thing he mastered quite early on is that idea of, if you say something often enough, people will believe it,
Oh my God, that's the essence of marketing.
right?
Yes.
So if he just says enough that, I didn't do these things, or they're just trying to attack me, or whatever, he parrots that enough, and then he does a few things that align with people's desires,
Yeah.
right? I don't like politicians, so he insults the politicians with
Yeah.
with
Right.
his little nicknames. It's like, oh, Notch, I like that, right? Or something else. He'll
Yeah.
he'll comment, and then you get these little tick marks along with him continually saying, I didn't do these things, and they're just
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
get me. And then it doesn't matter what's real anymore, because he's
Mhm.
set the narrative at that point.
He set the narrative. Yeah. And it's important if you want to create this, you got to set the narrative first before somebody else does, because otherwise you're just playing catch up and No, I
Yeah,
didn't.
if someone else sets the narrative first, you've got to then discredit the person, so then you can then reset the narrative,
Yeah, but it's just
right?
better to reset it up first. Just speed is
It
critical.
is, but so many people are so many what I would call ethically good or morally good, or people who are on the gooder side
The gooder,
of the
yeah,
situation
the gooder.
are going to have more reluctance to do that because that's going to feel like outright manipulation, which it
But
is,
that's just the game. That's how
right?
human nature
And
is.
so they're going to be late to the game because they're going to resist having to have to do that.
Yeah, yeah, I know. But that works. It works really well, and it's
Hmm.
not fair, right? Because people want a fair fight,
It's
and
not fair, but the problem is it's the audience that sets the tone.
yeah,
It sets the
yeah,
it say, if it didn't work, if you had a very educated, self-aware audience who wasn't swayed by this stuff, they'd stop doing it.
yeah, yeah. But that's human nature. You can't, Chris. It is inherently built in. You know, a human is a human, a cat is a cat, right? I mean, you just a dog is a dog. You just can't
You don't think you
expect.
can have a society where people are more self-aware, that they're not as easily swayed?
Well, I think yes, logic and critical thinking will help you from that, but you're still not immune. Nobody is
Well,
not
I would
immune.
ask you, isn't using violence against others part of human nature?
Of course, yeah, it's all through a history of time. All we do is kill people, right?
Don't you think we do less of that than we would if we didn't have laws in place?
Do we kill? Wait, hang
Do
on.
we
You're
kill
saying
and use violence less because we have laws?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I have no idea.
I think we do. I think the peer pressure and the threat of punishment are are consequences that when we think about them, we say, okay, it's
I
not
mean,
worth it,
probably it's a deterrent to some people, but still,
right?
people die all the time, right?
I'm not saying they don't. I'm saying, is there any impact from society's laws and rules and imposing those? I think there is.
Oh, I
I
would think
think
that definitely slows it
right.
down, if
So,
nothing
so
else.
what I'm getting at here is, I think then a society could be guided to be more self-aware and more analytical and the like. I just don't think that we have the structures in place to make that happen. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen.
Well, but
Now,
this is the.
and you're always going to have some level of people who are just mentally lazy.
Oh my gosh, of course, yeah, yeah. And I think that's kind of what philosophy and religion and the church does, is it sort of puts a, I don't know what to say, a thin veneer of being a nice person on top of some of our evil desires inside of us, you know?
I was going in a different direction when you said that in my mind.
Which direction are you going in?
I was going back to this idea that the world is complex and we're all lazy in general. So we always try to outsource our need to think to others. I can outsource my morality to the church; it will tell me what to do. I can outsource my ethics to an organization like the Bar Association, the Medical Association, and they'll tell me what to do. So I don't have to think about what's right and wrong. I will be told what's right and wrong. So I'm outsourcing what would be my responsibility as a wholesome human being to others. And it's the same thing with what we do with YouTube, right? We watch Thomas DeLore talking about diet and health, and we've basically outsourced some of that thought to him. I think it's a good choice because he backs up a lot of his thinking, but
Yeah,
some
yeah.
people choose bad people to outsource to.
Oh, absolutely. You gotta be careful. Yeah, you gotta be careful of the relationship. Yeah, I think all that's true. And I think
So,
it depends on environment, because let me tell you something. If you set the right environment up, you can get pretty much anybody to do almost anything if
mhm.
you set it up right. And I'll tell you one group that's really good at that is the military. I mean, they take this completely undisciplined, whatever, 17, 18-year-old, and in 8 weeks, he's a killing machine. I mean, it's a there's a lot of psychological stuff. Do you know, like when they're doing their little drill thing and they're dancing or whatever? Not dancing. What do they call it? Like marching or whatever, and they're singing songs.
Yes.
It's like, so what that does is they've intentionally chosen the beats of those songs to put your brain into more of a receptive state, and now they can put in information into that. It's like everything is thought through at the deepest level, actually.
Someone made a comment. I think it was today in Toastmasters about the military being. It was Clement was talking about the military was the fastest way that he ever learned, and he had the biggest amount of change in his life.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
what was going through the back of my mind was how beneficial it was that they were in the U.S. military.
yeah.
And there's a lot of good militaries out there, but there's ones that I would say probably are not ones that would teach you the same value structure, and you would not get the same thing out of some militaries as you would get out of the U.S. military. So I think there's a level of rule following, there's a level of whatever, but a big part of the success is the fact that a lot of time and money and thought went into designing the SOPs, went into
Oh my
designing the
gosh.
protocols, went into, and you look at how much money. So this is something that I thought about. I used to think about how much the government wastes on what it used to be $400 toilet seats or whatever they
Yeah,
used to talk about, or the $25 screw or whatever. I'm like, yeah, but that all pays for the thinking that went into this as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so
No,
I'm
right.
much more open to the idea of part of the reason why our US military is so effective is not just the technology. It's the processes and procedures that we've put in,
Oh my
that
gosh.
we've tested, that actually make us. I'd say it's more important than the technology is the process and procedures
Yeah, I
that
mean they're
make
both
it.
important, but yeah, yeah, it's the basically I'm just call it brainwashing. I mean they I mean you can literally take some dude and train him to be a killer because the ultimate thing they're looking for is absolute compliance. If your superior says go kill 50 people up on top of that hill, you're gonna like, yes sir, I'm gonna go kill them all because you told me to. And that's some freaky stuff, man, you know?
You think at the core that that's it? Because
Well, I'm sure they want other things, but
I get that you want compliance, but I would say, the North Korean army probably has that as well. And I don't think that I don't think the training you get in the North Korean military is going to be the equivalent of what you get in the U.S. military, even though they're both trained to go kill.
well, yeah, but okay, so that's a different thing. I want to break that into at least two pieces, actually.
Okay.
One is I tell you to do something and you're going to go attempt to do it. Now, how capable you are depends on how well I've trained you and the tools and the guns and all this other sort of stuff that you have, right? Your
Well,
capabilities are different than desire.
capabilities are one thing. I think there's a you're told to trust your chain of command in the US
Yes.
military, I believe, and that has to be backed up by a certain understanding of how decisions are made. Whether you agree with them or not is not the point, right? You
Yeah.
understand that there's a chain of command, there were orders that came down, there was analysis that was done, there was intelligence that went into this, all that kind of stuff. Versus some militaries, I think you act because you're afraid of getting killed if you don't do what you're told.
Oh, that's a different, yeah. And there's definitely some fear in the military, actually. But I
Yeah.
think there's not as much as other places because I think at some point you've got to have a level of trust, right? Like, look, we're in this together. And if I get in trouble, somebody will come get me, even if that means to scoop up my dead body. Somebody
Hmm.
will come. I'm not going to be just abandoned. And therefore, I'm not going to abandon anybody
So
else.
that's what I talk about when I talk about the structure that was built, right? The
Yeah.
fact that you've built this culture of, uh, I know I've got backing.
Yes.
You may be the grunt out there doing stuff, but there's an organization that's backing you,
Yeah. Right.
and has built into you a value structure that you think that they have too. You believe that
Yeah.
they have as well,
Yeah.
and therefore you trust that they're going to
Try
act in a certain way,
that they're going to take care of you when the chips are down.
right?
Yeah.
And so I think I was so what I was getting at when they mentioned this was how what would it have been like if this person had done 4 years not in the U.S. Navy but had done it in some other country,
It
and
depends. Oh,
some countries may have more technical capability than ours. Some countries may generally ours is very high level, but
it's pretty
I could
good.
some like I think it's Sweden or some of the Scandinavian countries. Their forces are trained in how to travel over snow
Oh,
and a bunch
interesting.
of other
Okay.
things. So they actually have they're better at certain environments than ours are, right? So,
Yeah, I know. What is it, Mossad or whatever, the Israel whatever intelligence agency?
mhm.
Apparently, they're top notch. They're like some of the they're in fact a lot of the CIA guys will say they're better than we are. They're as good as it gets, with that sort of stuff. They're
so,
brutal and they're
so this
ruthless.
is where you get into individuals versus groups, and how you work, right? Um, if you want to scale big,
Yeah,
you need to simplify your process so you can handle more and more people. right? We
Yeah,
talked about that earlier. If you want to build the ability to respond and react, you need
yeah,
to train individuals.
yeah. It's a different level of
So
training. Yeah,
so
yeah.
the thing I think is America has a much probably this is a guess, I don't know, and I don't think you're going to find the right information. I'm assuming the U.S. has a larger intelligence agency than the
I
Israelis do.
guess I don't know. I mean, who knows? I know the CIA does stuff, FBI does stuff, and there's probably 18,000 other
But
three-letter abbreviations that
but
do stuff. You know?
when you think of like a military person, right? A grunt has a certain different level of training than a specialist or someone
Oh,
who's
of
in a particular
course.
field,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
And I think what ends up happening is when you want someone who's really capable to make decisions on their own when they're
Yeah.
out, which I'm assuming intelligence officers need to be able to make certain decisions on their
Oh,
own.
yeah. Right.
They have to have a lot more understanding of the why and less about the what.
Well, I
Like the
think they need.
process is
I
the
think they
what,
need both. Yeah.
or the,
Yeah.
the process is the how, I guess, right?
The how.
And
Yeah.
it's like the how is less critical than the why
Well, no, I'm not.
because the why allows them to make a decision, which they might just bypass that process entirely.
I'm gonna push back against that. They are well trained because they need the capabilities. Because what we're asking to do is very technically difficult. You have to have tremendous teamwork, tremendous technical abilities. Like, if you look at your average Navy SEAL guy, he's way above and beyond the average infantry guy. He thinks more, he's smarter, he has more capability, he has more willpower, because they put him through a selection process that's very difficult.
So
And you get
what
a
are you
you get
saying
a
that's what are you saying that's different than what I said?
same thing, I think almost.
Because at the end of the day, what I'm getting at is when you need someone who can act more independently, when you need someone who needs to have subjective capability to make a decision, they need to have a lot more information in their head. They have to have a lot more capabilities and tools than the
Yes,
average
yes,
grunt would have to, and therefore it's a much more expensive resource to
yeah, yeah,
develop,
yeah. Their mindset,
right?
everything's superior, right?
So the thought I was wondering where I was coming from the Mossad idea was, is it such that they actually just spend a hell of a lot more time and money per agent than we do?
I don't know actually. I do know probably that their incentive is a little bit different because the stated objective of their energy of their enemies is to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, right? That's their objective. So it's like if you have that kind of pressure against you, it's like, okay, man, we gotta we
That's
gotta
a level of there's a level of commitment there. There's a different level of commitment. So yeah,
yeah, we gotta up our game, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. All right, Chris.
So one thing you were saying earlier when you talk about trust, and it occurred to me when you get a micromanager
Oh,
above
that's
you,
horrible.
your
Yeah.
boss is a micromanager. Everyone complains about the micromanager,
Oh my
and
God.
it
Yeah.
occurs to me the reason why is because it shows a lack of trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
They don't
Exactly.
trust that the work you're going to put out is going to be good enough for what they need.
Yeah. Right.
So they micromanage you to control the output, which
Yeah.
means that they don't trust your output.
Yeah. They don't trust your output, and it limits the capability significantly of your organization
Hmm.
because now
But it
you're
just
just yeah. Now you're operating at
why are they
the
micromanaging? Is it an environment that reinforces the need for them to micromanage because they have to cover their butts?
yeah. I think some people are just more micromanager than others. It's just different personality types. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think a lot of those micromanagers could be trained to not be micromanagers
Well,
if
yeah,
they
because they don't have the
focus,
skills. They don't know. They
right?
they don't know any better.
This is where one of the most interesting things when I was at KPMG that I thought was when you hit manager, it's like you went into this inner circle, because they had special training to deal with
Yeah.
complex situations, and there was
Yeah.
a whole bunch of stuff, and it was like there was manager training. It wasn't
Yeah.
just you know your crap and now you're a manager of the crap that you know.
It's a
No,
different set of
there
skills,
was a
right?
whole skill set they added to what you already knew. You were the
Yeah.
subject matter expert in whatever. Now we're going
Yeah.
to add a whole management skill set to you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so many other places I've worked that weren't structured as well. Managers just meant you'd been doing that in a job for enough years that you could lead a couple other people doing the same
Yeah.
job,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's not the same thing as knowing how to manage people.
Yeah, that's a different skill because what they're kind of saying to you is like we know you're good at doing your thing
Hmm.
individually. Now let's see if you can get other people to do the same thing. That's tremendous leverage, right?
Yep. But it shows that the organization has thought through their ladder of growth, what they value,
Yeah,
and they've placed enough value on you to invest money in you on,
yeah,
hey, let's do this. But the other thing it does is it gives them a standardized skill set around people management that they
yeah,
understand, so they get better results too.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's a better thing. I was talking to what was he? I keep forgetting the name. A Delta Force guy, which apparently in special operator, they're at the absolute peak, above Navy SEALs, above everything, right?
Hmm.
Um, and he was telling me all the cool stuff that he would get. Like basically, he says, basically, I got whatever I wanted with even the minorest justification. So, for instance, let's say I needed two other pairs of $60,000 night vision goggles, 120 grand. Boom, just not. I mean, literally the checks they would write us because we were the number one guys. Unlimited resources, unlimited ammo, unlimited everything. And I'm like, that must have been super cool. He says, man, it was. But let me tell you something. It came with some expectations as well, too.
Hmm.
Some very, very high expectations. And
But I mean, everything's an ROI, right?
yeah, everything's an ROI.
So
Yeah.
there are the leadership, the people who ran that organizations thought that the ROI was, you know, we're gonna get more out of it than we put into it.
Well, what they need is they need a small group of people. And I think special for there's only a few thousand of them or some. We need like thoroughbreds. We need you to go in and do stuff that nobody else can do. And the president needs those capabilities.
Hmm.
I'm like, holy
I can see that.
Toledo's. Yeah. These are the guys who would come home and like you'd see their work on the morning news or whatever. Crazy.
But that's investment of time and resources gets exponentially higher the closer you get to the top. Just like we talked about, if you want better availability of your computer systems, 99% of the time, 99.9% of the time,
Yeah.
99.99% of the time, every nine you add doubles or quadruples the cost
Oh my
of
gosh.
of
Yes.
the setup. And that's the same thing I think that applies to here, right? If
Yeah.
you want a guy who's better at a job than 80% of the people, it's
Yeah.
this amount of cost. If you want him to be better than 90% of the people, it's this
Yeah.
percent of the cost. And 95%, and then 99%, and then 99.9%. And pretty soon you want the guy who's in the top 10 in the world,
Oh yeah.
you're going to be paying more than just 10 times the amount. You're probably going
Oh
to be paying,
God.
100 times the amount, 1,000 times the amount.
Yeah.
Because the
Obscene amounts of money. Yeah.
because the difference is so little nuance. But this is true of everything of value.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I go to musical instruments and people say, "Oh, how much should I spend on a ukulele, like my ukuleles, right?" I said, "Well, I don't know how much time you're going to put into it, but you want a pretty good ukulele, you're going to spend $500.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a nice one, a very good one you
Yeah.
can be proud
Nice
of.
one.
You
Yeah.
want a good playable one that won't cause any problems when you're playing, about $300.
Yeah.
And ukuleles get nicer and nicer and nicer up to about $1,500.
Yeah.
At
Right.
$1,500, the quality of the sound does not change much.
Yeah.
At that point, what you're getting is bells and whistles,
This show. It's just
right?
it's yeah.
If you want an improvement in the sound quality, you're going to be talking about thousands of dollars of investing in researching and understanding how to get that extra 0.01% of performance out
Yeah.
of it,
And
right?
that's probably the most people won't even be able to hear, right?
No.
Most people won't even be aware of it.
No, but if you really want to have the absolute best blank in the world,
Yeah,
you
right.
have to research and understand how to carve out that extra tenth or hundredth of a percent.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's right. And those people get compensated at unfair amounts over the average person. And it could be just genetically, they're just gifted to do that. It could be they've just spent, and they're probably super gifted, and they've probably spent thousands of hours. Probably a
Oh, so
combination.
this kind of ties back. Let's tie this back to you talked about AI skills earlier,
Yeah,
right? So I think we talked about in the old days people became master craftsmen of one thing,
yeah,
right?
right,
And they
right.
learned to do one thing. Um, and then it became important for us to start mixing disciplines. I needed a blacksmith, and I needed a, whatever, I don't know what, an engineer or whatever to start building things out. And so I actually had to go and talk to experts in different fields.
Yeah.
And it became the job of someone to organize those people and make sure they work
Yeah.
together and
Right.
they
Right.
speak the
Right.
same language. And then
Exactly.
your project managers or whatever you're going to
Yeah.
call them, right? Um, but then we were all told as a society, probably from the 70s or 80s on, that we should specialize. Right,
Yeah.
because we saw specialized doctors make 4 times what a regular
Oh my
doctor makes,
gosh.
right?
Yeah.
Specialization. If you specialize in coding, and you specialize in this, you specialize in that, you will make more money than just the average person. So if you
Yeah.
are a generalist with 10 years versus a specialist with 10 years, a specialist with 10 years will make more money,
Yeah. Way
right?
more because you can do things the other guy can't do. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're at a level that there's more investment in time and
Yeah.
effort to get to that level, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's been the way it's been for 20, 30, maybe more years. And that's what we have. And then people specialized. And what suffered in the meantime was that skill set that allowed you to plug the people together and
Yeah.
work together.
Yeah.
And so, I think project management is such a big thing. Product management, project management, program management is such a big thing because we're not as a society as good as we could be at it.
Yeah.
I
Right.
think, and before when, I'm going to go back to before in the 40s when every scientist was a white male educated at probably one of the same 10 colleges,
Yeah. Right.
getting them to work together was probably not that difficult to do.
Right.
And especially in time of war, when we all trusted the government, whatever it is, right? It was probably something that it wasn't that hard to make people work together.
Yeah. Right. Right.
They respected authority, all that kind of stuff. As we now know our skill sets are so valuable, we can hop from company to company and we don't have to have loyalty to a structure.
Yeah.
It becomes harder and harder for the project manager to get the work out of people
Mm-hmm.
and get it to fit together. So
Yeah.
I actually think AI is going to replace the SME before it replaces the generalist.
I think so. Yeah.
Right.
I think so. Maybe.
Because it's got the depth of knowledge available at its fingertips. It's
Yeah.
going to know more than your best SME because it has access to all that information.
Yeah. Right. 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 Right.
Real world understanding of knowledge and how it applies, that will still be valuable for a long time.
Yeah.
But then I think what's happened is then you still need people who can choreograph all that work. So,
absolutely. Yeah.
so instead of paying for 10 subject matter experts at $300K a pop, that's $3 million, I'm now going to pay for 10 AI experts, AI agents, at $100 a month a pop, $1,000 a year a pop, whatever.
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
And
Right.
then what becomes important is the project management team.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it goes back to being the guy who choreographs. It's the important one.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. He played in the orchestra, right?
So
I mean-
I think right now it's going to be the skill set to have for the time being is how to make AI play nice with itself.
Kind of like an integrator, right? You're taking all these different pieces. You may not understand how they work, but I know how to hook them up and make something work,
So I think it's a mixture of hooking them up together and then and of actually interacting between AI and people, because people will still be involved.
Yeah.
Right. So the project manager now becomes a little bit of a technician in being able to understand how to plug AI into other AI.
Yes. Yes.
And how to make it talk.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that so that's probably where the skill set is. If you're not going to be in AI and building AI itself, and most of these people who are building automations and tools are not building AI. They're using AI. There's a distinction.
Right. Exactly. They're just plug and play, right?
Yeah.
Like just putting puzzle pieces together to make the picture, which right now is a valuable skill. But ultimately that will probably go away because AI will be able to do that at some point.
Yeah. Well, yeah. What did we talk about last time? The that interface between the AI and the automation tool and the client,
Yeah.
or the service. I guess the AI and the backend service.
Yeah.
And that the backend service is going to start creating a way that's the equivalent of an API in essence.
Yeah.
That can adapt to change.
And then you use standard tools like Zapier. Okay, I need Zapier. It'll connect the data and this, and you just plug it in.
I mean, you imagine you're going to have an AI that does the connection for you, right?
Yeah,
right now
right.
they're trying to do that with, what's the Chinese one under the Manus, right? I've been playing around with it. Manus is supposed to be an operator, which means it can actually do its own thing. You can tell it what to do.
Interesting. Yeah.
It kind of does that, but I think it's more of a deep research kind of a tool. But I had it code some stuff for me, and I was playing around with it, and it's pretty good. And it's still, and it's free for those extra features right now. So I was playing around with it, and I think when it gets to the point where it has all the APIs for all of the agents in the
Yeah,
back end, and
yeah,
I can just talk to it. Okay, I need you to send me up with a customer service answering service. We'll set it up with this phone number,
yeah,
and I want you to have a female who can speak these 17 languages
yeah,
with these accents, and here's the database of knowledge for them to be trained
yeah.
on. Boom, 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 boom. Right. Here's
Remote
the
agent.
workflows they're going to use to drive traffic to different departments.
Yeah,
Uh, you know, once
yeah,
that happens, it's all verbal. And then it's just, and then, so then what your skill set becomes is knowing the process. I'm not even going to say building the process,
yeah,
knowing the process, because AI will build the better process at some point for you.
yeah, yeah.
But knowing the process, knowing how to prompt AI to create it, and I think that's going to be around for a while. There's just too much nuance to human thought that they're not going to get some of these nuanced things for a while.
Yeah,
We'll
it's
get false
like a
positives and
translator,
stuff for a
right?
while.
It's like
Yeah.
translator. It's like I know what you want, the business guy. Listen, I need this, right? And
Yeah.
then I know it's possible. I just don't know how to put all the pieces because everything changes so fast, you
So
know.
an AI business analyst? What would be the way to describe that?
I don't know. I want to call it like an integrator. You're just taking off the shelf technology and hardware and integrating it together in a way that will solve a particular problem.
Integrator sounds too too low level to me. There's a
Okay.
level of analysis that still needs to occur in an understanding of process and flow.
Well, but that's an integrator, right? Because you got to understand the problem you're trying to solve before you can fix it. So that skill is very valuable. I mean, we'll come up with a better word. I mean, that's just what I got. That's just what pops in my head right now.
Yeah,
I know you
I
want
think
to do more than that.
I feel like integrators emphasizing the wrong skill set. The
Okay.
plug and play aspect of it is going to be easier and easier. It's the understanding how to plug in what to plug and play and how to determine what to plug and play.
Well, that's you got to understand the problem, right? That's you got to understand what's going on.
Yeah, but an integrator's given a problem. You have to understand it, but you're given a problem. To me, the point here is to diagnose the problem
Okay, well,
and then build it. I
that's a
think
little
that's what I'm
different
getting
skill.
at. Is
Okay,
there's
that's
a
fine.
diagnostics aspect here that isn't captured in the word integrator. Is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, okay. I mean, so then I mean it's a little different. I mean, it's a difference in skill. One thing is that I have a very particular problem and I want you to just do this to solve it. You integrate it together. And there's another thing, look, my sales are down and I just don't understand why I need my sales to go up, right? So it's sort of still solving a problem, but you just need more. It's a more difficult problem to
So
solve.
then, would we get industry specific or profession specific people like? I need better marketing, so I'm going to bring in a marketing AI person
Yeah,
who
always.
understands the
Yeah.
marketing market,
Yeah.
or are you going to bring in a marketing expert who works with your AI person, and the AI person builds it, but the marketing person provides the input.
Whoever understands the problem and can articulate it the best will be at the top of the food chain.
So I think, yeah, so what I'm worried about from a management perspective is that you every AI company out there makes a solution, and you cobble together 100 different AIs to do your
Yeah,
company's work,
right, right,
and
right,
now
right.
you're managing 100 systems in essence,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is and that to me is a problem. Eventually, the AIs get big enough; they handle more and more things, and then it's a trade-off, right? It's like an ERP system. These
yeah.
AIs become ERP systems in essence, right?
Yeah, but that's how it always works, Chris. It always works in something new. There's 100 companies out there offering a solution, and over time, it always whittles down to two or three or four, right? Everything
Yeah, but
consolidates.
think about how many tools we use just for this podcast. How
I
many
know.
AI tools we're touching for this podcast,
Yeah,
right?
a
There's
handful.
a market for someone to put them all into one tool.
Yeah, yeah, and that'll happen. It'll consolidate, and if somebody will come in with some cash, and they'll buy all these different companies and consolidate things, and it just. I mean, you look through history, everything happens the same way. You know, it's this million people running out trying to solve a problem, and then some just get luckier, and the ones that have a little bit, then they start buying other people, and there you go. You consolidate to a handful of companies doing this, the big boys.
Consolidate, break up, consolidate, break up.
Yeah, right, exactly. You got an Apple, you got a Microsoft, you know, I mean, you got a handful of oil companies, online stuff. I mean, in some cases it goes to one, right? I mean, look at Amazon. I mean, they're probably the online purchasing company more than almost anybody else.
Yep.
Not that you can't buy from Walmart and other things directly as well too, but Amazon's that's the big boy.
Yeah, they're the gorilla.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things again. So when he was first talking about selling all the stuff, and the reason he chose Amazon was because it's the biggest river and everything's he carries everything down the river, and I'm like, and he was just a book company at the time, and I'm
Yeah.
like, what the hell are you talking about? Why would I buy toilet paper online? Why would I
I
buy,
know.
you
I
know?
know. You didn't
And
see
people
it.
still
You
don't.
didn't see
Not a
it.
lot of people do buy toilet paper online, but they order it through online, and
Yeah.
it's delivered from their store. You
Yeah.
know, it's not like I'm buying it from a warehouse online necessarily,
Yeah.
but I am buying it from the local Whole Foods or wherever online.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think he just captured, the essence of the problem. Because I remember watching him in an interview. I thought it was so interesting. He goes, a lot of people, they'll say, what's going to change in the next 10 years? And he's like, I asked the question, what's not going to change in 10 years? And he goes, people ordering stuff online and putting it in a box and getting it to them fast. That's not going to change. So he's like, I want to get really good at doing that. And that's what he
Well,
did.
and he basically built a company that's bigger than UPS and FedEx, right?
Oh, I know. It's
From that
crazy.
aspect, he built an online web services that what
Yeah.
I don't know what percentage of the internet it runs, but
I don't
it's
know.
huge,
A large chunk. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. AWS.
I don't know what percentage of the business is actually online sales anymore.
I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know. I know he makes a lot of money though. That's for sure. That's for sure. Hey, so
Yep.
Chris, we got two options. One, we could wrap it up now because I got to go to the restroom, or we do a
Hmm.
restroom break and come back. What's your
Let's do a
what's your?
restroom break and then see if we can. I think we should still wrap up, but I think let's go ahead and just do a quick restroom break.
Okay,
So,
I'll be back in about 3 minutes then.
okay, sounds good. So I think we covered a lot of stuff. We covered
Covered a lot.
trust. I mean,
Yeah.
I do think trust as the simple idea behind a lot of our ability to get along with each other,
Oh yeah.
right? And trust doesn't mean we're in agreement. Trust means I understand how you think, and I, right? This is where a lot of I think the screw up today is. People believe I can't trust you unless you're 100% in alignment with me.
Oh yeah. That's a different thing. Yeah.
Right, and that's not the same thing. It's like if you're not 100% aligned with me, that then obviously I can't trust you is wrong. Trust
Yeah.
means I understand you and the way you think well enough that I can predict how you're going to be.
Yeah.
And
Predict.
when
Yeah.
that happens, that means I can interact with you. And I know that these topics, you're going to get you're going to get angry and upset. So we stay away from those topics. I know
Yeah.
that on these topics, you're going to make decisions that are more religious, more secular, whatever. And I'm able to interact with you knowing that.
Yeah. It makes you feel safe, basically.
Yes, and the problem with all these people on you see protesting and arguing and going to left or right rallies is they're talking to someone with a different opinion and they automatically assume since there's no trust there that the person is against them. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's tough. And so I
Yeah.
think if we want to ask people what they think about trust and how this fits in and maybe even tell us what their definition of trust is, it would be
Yeah, I'd
interesting to
like that.
hear.
I want to
Yeah.
hear other people's definition of trust. Yeah, as above, just I can predict, but it also I can predict. So therefore, that doesn't make me necessarily feel I feel safe around you necessarily. It's like because I could trust that you love killing people, so I could trust you'll probably kill me eventually.
But
But
then that means that I know that when I'm around you, I've got to be much more careful. I've got to have a weapon. I've got whatever it is, right?
yeah, I
So
may not feel safe around you.
yeah,
Right, exactly.
the point being is I once I know how you're going to react, I can adjust how I behaved so I can feel, yeah, I can feel as good as possible. I guess would be the
Yeah,
way I would say,
yeah,
as
feel
safe as
safe, right?
possible.
Safe enough where I can just focus on doing my work without having to constantly
Yeah,
worry
and
about.
so in most situations, you're not worried about life or death. You're worried about being ostracized. Ostracization, is
Yeah,
that a word?
something or just
Yeah.
something going on. Yeah, yeah. That I
And
think.
or you're worried about other things going on, so you will adjust your behavior accordingly
Yeah,
to be as safe as possible in that environment. If you're in an environment where everyone's backstabbing each other, you'll know that you need to act in a certain way. If
yeah,
you're in an
right.
environment where people are open and vulnerable, you can act in a different way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think it's fine. Yeah, you can just expect, right? But just though it doesn't mean you can feel safe. Like if you can't trust somebody, I think that automatically means you don't feel safe around them.
I think there's probably a different word we need about being trust and aligned in our ideas.
Yeah, that's a different word. Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So I trust who you are because I know who you are, and therefore I can act accordingly.
yeah.
Whereas I trust who you are, and we're aligned on some of the basics that go into that, and therefore I feel safe around you. That's a
You
different
feel
thing.
safe. Yeah, because you're in the same tribe, right? We're aligned on
Yeah,
values.
that's where the tribe comes from. The tribe has similar values, right?
Yeah,
Compared
yeah.
to other
Similar
tribes.
values. And they could be limited. I mean, you could be in a bowling tribe and you love bowling, and you could be doing the church, and your church and bowling group could be very different groups, right?
But this is why we talk about, there's the circle of yourself, your family, your
Yeah.
friends, your neighborhood or tribe, your village, your city, right? And the bigger it gets, the alignment goes down. So the safety, yeah, what you agree upon goes down, right? The things you can trust someone on go down.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the
Yeah.
alignment goes down. So basically, your level of trust has to go down as well because you
Yeah.
don't have that alignment. In a family, you have a lot more alignment, and you're with your friends, you have
Yeah.
a lot more alignment. And so, but then the country comes into play, right? And so what's happened over years is our country is less aligned than it used to be because the things that we trust the average person to be like are no longer what they
Yeah.
were however many years ago.
Yeah. And I think it's important that you trust, actually feel safe, because then you can do your best work. Because people that don't feel safe are more focused on being safe than just doing their work, you know?
You're spending your time covering your ass instead of taking risks. And as we
Yeah.
said, taking risks and failing is how we grow.
Yeah.
So,
And so that's why if you're building a high performance organization, trust is a critical thing, more than alignment. But you got to be aligned too. But trust is like, if you don't get the trust, nothing else matters. That's like a foundational thing that has to be built upon.
yep. And we should probably go into how people show, how people, what characteristics people show that build trust.
Well, I mean, really important one is consistency. That's one of the top
Consistency,
ones.
walking the walk, showing that you're interested in things beyond what's in it for them. I mean, there's a lot of aspects, right?
Yeah, I
So,
mean, in our podcast, I mean, one of the big things is that we're consistent, that we're, going to be dropping episodes at, Sunday at 10 p.m. Pacific, like without fail, right? At
yep,
least to the end of this year.
yep.
At least, yeah, yeah, exactly. Well,
All right. Well, so anyway, I think you opened up the question if anyone has any good arguments for, I think it was predestination or free will.
free will, yeah, how
Uh,
those work
we talk
together,
about
right?
trust here. I think there's a lot that people can chime in on this
Yeah,
because I do think we can go on even longer on some of this
yeah.
stuff. But
Oh my gosh, yeah, and we will. This is episode
oh, and
episode
even your
17.
question of like what skills do we need for 2025 with a world of AI coming? If anyone has any
Yeah, I've
thoughts
been
on
thinking
that,
about that. Yeah,
right? Or what jobs might be safe for a while.
for a while. Yeah, exactly. And like anything, you got to adapt because the environment's going to change, and people that can
That's the hard
adapt.
thing, though, right? You think about it. Factory jobs didn't require you to adapt because the factory didn't change that often.
No, 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 no.
Nowadays, it's like the factory is changing every week.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
And I don't think the average human, the way we think, is equipped to deal with that much change comfortably.
that
So that's
fast.
going to be a big change for people as a whole.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
And
wonder,
some are
in
going to
less
do well,
developed,
and some are not.
in less developed countries where they don't have the high level of technology that we have,
Yeah.
are they going to be safe from AI for a while, or are they going to be hit even harder? Because
That
they're gonna leapfrog over a lot of the steps that we went through to grow into what we
yeah,
were.
right,
Which means
right,
if they're
right.
leapfrogging it, they're not taking the people. I mean, you think about the 1940s, 50s, 60s when the middle class grew and wealth was made for a huge chunk of the U.S. population.
Yeah.
Are other countries going to have an ability to do that? Are they going to go just straight to AI producing everything? In which case, no one was able to build wealth.
Could be. I mean, potentially. Well, I mean, that's assuming that if you know AI, you can't build wealth. I think you're making an assumption there that probably isn't true. Are
If you
not
don't
true
know
in
AI, you
everything.
can't. How in the heck are you going to beat AI in buying transactions on stock? And how are you going to beat AI on just being able to get stuff done faster?
Become a
I,
plumber.
that's
Plumber,
yeah. So
build
you've
stuff.
got a service job which eventually will be taken over by AI and robots.
Yeah, absolutely. The service job. Well, it's like, remember, we outsourced all the factory workers, we outsource all the sort of stuff, but you can't outsource people build because people want houses, and.
But if you don't need a plumber if you don't have indoor plumbing.
Well, yeah, but I want indoor
And
plumbing.
if we leapfrog that and go straight to AI taking away people's jobs working in the field, and then they don't have the ability to buy a house because they no longer have
Yeah,
jobs,
Yeah.
I'm going worst case scenario, which
Yeah.
you
I
know,
know.
I mean, we once said that people would stop talking to each other because now we have the ability to teleconference, and people talk to each other just as much,
All
right?
the time. People
That
like,
didn't. People will stop going to the store because we'll be buying everything online. People still go to the store.
still people
Yes,
go to the
yes, it
store.
had an impact, but that's not the same thing as it's going to
But they
disappear.
may
So,
go less. I mean, I don't think I've been to a store in quite a while. I mean, probably 2 or 3 weeks at least, you know. In fact, just one thing I did is like, I just needed some cut because my CNC machine's leaking. So I needed a certain kind. I called Tormach and they said, okay, get this kind. They're like, go to Home Depot. And I just ordered online and it's going to be here tomorrow. I'm like, why would I want to drive to Home Depot? 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back, 20 minutes to find the thing, plus the gas. Just, it'll
so
show
I
up.
still buy stuff that takes too much to ship, like dirt.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, yeah, you need an
Yeah.
alternate. Yeah.
And one of the comments that in my text this week, someone was texted me a funny video about adulting is hard. You know, being an adult is hard,
Yeah.
right? And one of the things in there was, you know, when you were a kid, you spent your money on fun stuff. When you're an adult, you don't spend your money. And I was thinking, I'm in line at Home Depot buying dirt, and I'm
Yeah.
thinking, I'm buying dirt. I'm spending money on dirt,
Yeah.
right?
Well, if you need dirt, yeah, you need dirt.
Well, but
Yeah.
it really shows you, you know, kids needs are much more fun.
I
Buying
think so.
things that as a kid are much more fun.
They just want sugar in video games. They're good, you know.
Yeah, that's what I want too.
There you go. Exactly.
That's what
Problem
I
is it'll
want.
kill you though. Yeah, it'll kill you. Okay,
Yeah.
Chris.
All right.
With that, let's wrap this. Let's wrap it up.
Sounds good. I'll talk to you later. I don't know if we need. Okay, let's stop real quick here. I'm
Okay.
stopping.
Okay.